Tonight, we return to Hogwarts, not as homesick first years, not as nostalgic readers tracing the curve of a lightning scar, but as investigators walking the corridors by candlelight while a storm claws at the castle walls. Tonight, we ask a question that should feel impossible. What if the most dangerous force in Harry Potter's life was never Voldemort at all, but his own school? The story told to us is comforting. A boy who is unwanted in the Muggle world finds a home in a castle of moving staircases, enchanted feasts, and rooms that appear when you need them most. Hogwarts is described as sanctuary, as refuge, as the first place Harry ever feels truly alive. This is important because when you step back from the warmth of the Great Hall and look at this castle the way an investigator would, the picture changes. The grave of that comforting illusion is shallow. Beneath it lies a school where an 11-year-old nearly dies every single year. Imagine writing Hogwarts up not as legend, but as a case file. A headmaster who knowingly stores the Philosopher's Stone inside the building and protects it with lethal traps that 3 first years can access. A forbidden forest that remains forbidden in name only, used for detentions among creatures that kill on sight. Dementors posted at the gates of a school full of children. A tournament with a documented body count brought back as entertainment, then allowed to proceed even when a 14-year-old's name emerges from the fire. The grave was empty. The grave of safety, of responsible guardianship, of the idea that the adults ever truly put survival before the story they wanted the war to tell. Because someone knew. Not Dumbledore, who had supposedly seen enough death to be cautious, yet watched the pattern repeat. Not Hagrid, who had led children into the trees with a lantern and a kind heart, trusting the castle's magic to keep them whole. Not Sirius, who had raged at a distance, yet still sent Harry back through those doors. They all participated in the same quiet assumption that danger at Hogwarts was necessary, even instructive. That the boy at the center of the prophecy was not merely a child, but a weapon that needed tempering in fire. This becomes the central thesis of our re-examination. Behind the whimsy and wonder lies something colder. A deliberate pattern of institutional negligence, calculated risk, and perhaps even strategic endangerment directed, or at least permitted, by Dumbledore himself. Each school year becomes another controlled burn, another trial by dragon, basilisk, Dementor, Death Eater. Each crisis looks less like an accident and more like part of a plan that treats Harry as both student and experiment. What if the castle was never simply haunted by ghosts, but by the choices of the adults who built their war on a child's back? In this video, we will move year by year, book by book, as if turning the pages of a long, damning report. First year, the stone. Second, the basilisk. Third, the Dementors. Fourth, the graveyard. 5th through 7th, a school slowly transforming into a battlefield until the war quite literally marches through the dormitories. We will revisit the familiar scenes, but the light will be different now, the shadows longer. This is not a rant. It is an autopsy of a beloved world, and when we are done, you may find that the castle you loved looks less like a home, and more like a beautiful, enchanted arena that almost killed its chosen champion over and over again. To see Hogwarts clearly, the question has to change. Not how did this castle save Harry, but how did this institution, draped in banners and nostalgia, almost get him killed every single year while insisting it was keeping him safe? This is important. Because for Harry, the train from platform 9 3/4 does not simply carry him from Muggle suburb to magical school. It carries him from one hunting ground to another, from a staircase cupboard and a locked cat flap to moving staircases and doors that open onto lethal secrets. The bruises change shape. The danger acquires Latin names and glittering enchantments. But the pattern of endangerment remains horribly, intimately familiar. He arrives believing the castle is the opposite of Privet Drive. The truth is colder. Hogwarts does not break the cycle, it refines it. The Dursleys weaponize neglect and contempt. Hogwarts weaponizes wonder. Troll in the dungeon. A mountain of cursed treasure beneath the floors. A forest so dangerous that even detentions are a kind of quiet sentence. Each marvel is also a possible grave. Not Dumbledore, who had watched a baby sleep among the ruins of Godric's Hollow, seems willing to name this aloud. Not Hagrid, who had ripped open the cabin door and told Harry he was a wizard, pauses to ask whether the boy is moving from one unsafe home to another. The adults who knew he was alive fold him into a story in which risk is tradition, peril is education, and nearly dying is simply part of the curriculum. So the video will move year by year as if opening case files. First year, a Philosopher's Stone hidden in a school, guarded by traps that can maim or kill, yet porous enough for 11-year-olds to penetrate. Second year, a basilisk in the pipes, children petrified in corridors, and the doors never truly closed. Third year, Dementors, Soul Eaters, stationed around playing fields and lakeshore. Fourth year, a tournament with a documented body count transformed into compulsory combat for a boy who never volunteered. Each near death is not an accident. It is evidence. We will treat every adult choice as a data point in a larger plan, whether spoken or not. Who allowed the Forbidden Forest to remain both forbidden and routinely entered? Who accepted Quidditch matches where falls from 100 feet were expected entertainment? In a real boarding school, one basilisk, one Dementor's kiss, one dragon on school grounds would end a headmaster's career and close the institution in a day. Here, the term continues. The letters go out on schedule. That contrast is the ethical frame. Imagine governors and ministers standing in a charmed corridor trying to explain to grieving parents that magic requires this level of hazard, that greatness demands proximity to death. Would any of it sound like protection, or would it sound like a justification offered after the fact? Beneath that question lies something darker. Is Hogwarts simply incompetent, a beautiful ruin held together by habit and hope? Or is it a deliberate crucible, a place where a boy marked by prophecy is allowed, even guided, to face escalating trials until he becomes exactly what one old wizard needs him to be? The next sections will follow the evidence, year by year, until that distinction becomes impossible to ignore. Year 1. Halloween, the moment when Hogwarts stops being a whimsical castle and reveals the first crack in its stone. The official story is almost light-hearted, a mountain troll in the dungeon, a bit of chaos, 3 children becoming friends over a shared lie. But imagine it written as an incident report instead of a bedtime tale. A hostile creature of known lethality breaches the perimeter. The castle's alarms, if they exist, fail. The staff response is improvised. Within minutes, 2 unsupervised first years are alone in a bathroom with a being that could crush them into the flagstones. This is important. The troll does not enter like a joke. It brings with it a stench of rot and damp stone, the weight of its footsteps reverberating through medieval corridors designed for echo and fear. Its club is not a prop. It is heavy enough to shatter stone sinks, to crater ancient floors, to turn an 11-year-old spine into splinters with a single misjudged swing. When that club slams down beside Harry's head, the story pretends at comedy. The truth is that he misses death by perhaps the width of his own scar. Systemically, the failures are almost surgical in their precision. A known dangerous creature is somehow inside a school that boasts the greatest protective magic in Britain. Students are ordered back to their dormitories, but there is no roll call. No verification that hundreds of children are actually behind the doors that are supposed to keep them safe. Not Dumbledore, who had lived through one war already, thinks to say, "We count them, every single one, before we move." Not Hagrid, who had carried a baby from the ruins of a cottage and knew the weight of a nearly lost child, is stationed outside a bathroom door. Quirrell, the man who brings the troll in, is already visibly unstable, stammering, sweating, radiating the kind of brittle terror that any competent headmaster would at least investigate. Yet, he is hired. He is kept. He is trusted with a position that grants him intimate access to children and to the castle's deepest wards. Why? What plan justifies that risk? Where is Dumbledore when the troll roams the corridors and the first years are herded like sheep through shadowed stairwells? Strip away the narrative charm and the scene becomes almost unbearable. Hermione sobbing under broken stone. Harry climbing a troll as if scaling his own grave. Ron, hands shaking, attempting a spell that might fail, that might misfire. That might, in another version of this story, leave 3 small bodies on a bathroom floor while the feast continues above. The aftermath is framed as victory. House points. Laughter, a new friendship sealed over shared rule-breaking. Yet beneath the applause lies something colder. Hogwarts has just administered its first exam. Not in transfiguration or potions, but in survival. Harry's reflexes are measured. His instinct to run toward danger, not away, is confirmed and rewarded. Somewhere, far from the Great Hall, 2 parents who are still alive feel the spike of his terror through Lily's monitoring charms and understand with dawning horror that this castle is already testing their son. And the troll is only the opening question. What happens when the questions get harder? What happens when the questions get harder? They do not get harder by accident. They get harder by design. Because in Harry's first year, the question is not, can you survive a troll? The question is, what happens when the headmaster decides to hide the most coveted object in the magical world inside a boarding school and call it protection? The Philosopher's Stone is not a trinket. It is a promise of immortality, of endless gold, of power over decay and time. Every adult in this story understands that such magic draws predators. Dumbledore understands it most of all. And still, when Nicholas Flamel agrees the stone must be moved, it does not go to a Gringotts vault layered in goblin wards, or to a remote fortress guarded only by auras and dragons. It goes to a castle full of children who sleep beneath its shadow. This is important. Because once the stone is at Hogwarts, the so-called protections around it read less like a vault and more like a curriculum. A 3-headed dog, enormous and howling, stationed behind a locked door on the 3rd floor. Devil's snare that tightens when you struggle and only loosens if you remember, under pressure, how plants respond to light and heat. a lethal broom gauntlet that weaponizes Quidditch skills, turning play into survival. Then the descent becomes more deliberate, more revealing. A life-size chessboard where the pieces do not simply move but crush, where the only way forward is to understand strategy and accept that someone you love might have to fall. A potions riddle that demands logic, not raw power, with poison in most bottles and only a single path through the flames. And at the end of the corridor, the final examination, direct confrontation with a parasitic dark wizard fused to a man's skull. A possession so grotesque it feels like a physical metaphor for the war Harry was born into. Who are these protections built to stop? A competent adult dark wizard who can apparate, blast stone, imperious guardians, and fly without broom or door? Or curious, brave children, whose personalities Dumbledore reads the way other men read weather, whose house traits he has sorted and named. Not Dumbledore, who had watched generations of Gryffindors prove that forbidding a corridor is the surest way to ensure it is walked. The access path matters. The door is locked, yes, but not warded beyond the reach of an 11-year-old with a borrowed key and a simple unlocking charm. The third floor is announced in the welcoming feast as forbidden to anyone who does not wish to die a very painful death, a warning phrased like a dare and delivered to a house that treats dares as destiny. Clues are scattered, Hagrid speaking of Fluffy after a drink, Snape's visible injury, the Gringotts break-in reported in the paper. 3 first years, with no adult guidance, can assemble the pattern and walk the gauntlet in a single night. This is not sloppy security. It is a loaded gun placed on the table of the narrative, gleaming in candlelight, waiting. The stone is the pretext. The corridor is the test. And somewhere far from the castle, 2 parents who are still alive feel their son cross each threshold and understand that someone else has a plan for Harry. A plan that assumes he will step into danger when summoned. The grave was empty, but the role prepared for the orphan who is not an orphan is already full. The only question now is how many times the gun will be reloaded. The gun fires for the first time beneath the school. Not in a battlefield, not in a ministry chamber, but in a room with a mirror and a child who still sleeps in a cupboard in his memories. Harry is 11. This is important. The final chamber is silent stone and reflected light, and he stands before the mirror of Erist with no adult backup, no plan beyond a half-formed suspicion that someone worse than Snape wants the stone. What he finds is Quirrell's body, a pale, trembling replica of a teacher turned inside out by the face on the back of his skull. Voldemort is not a rumor here. He is breath on Harry's neck. There is no clear escape route, no ward flares, no summoned staff, no protective charms spiraling from the ceiling because a first year has crossed a fatal threshold. The safeguards end one room too early, as if the story itself assumes that the child who has come this far must now be measured against death. Harry knew fear in the cupboard. He learns proximity to annihilation in front of the mirror. The magic is not symbolic, it hurts. Quirrell's hands close around Harry's throat and burn, skin blistering, the smell of scorched flesh rising in the chamber like incense for the wrong god. Harry's own skin blisters where they touch, the sacrificial protection in his blood turning contact into agony. He does not understand the theory. He understands that he is being strangled and that the world is narrowing to white noise and pressure and then nothing at all as he blacks out inches from the floor. Dumbledore arrives only after the crisis has burned itself out, not during the struggle when one spell or one shouted word could have ended it. After, conveniently late, impeccably timed, just in time to explain, to reassure, to turn a near murder into a lesson about love and ancient magic. Not Dumbledore, who had layered the stone's protections and spoken of the third-floor corridor in jesting warnings, could claim ignorance of the stakes. He knew Voldemort was hunting the stone. He knew Quirrell was compromised. He still left a gap large enough for an 11-year-old to fall through. There were other paths. He could have removed the stone from Hogwarts entirely, placing it beyond any student's orbit. He could have warded the third floor with magic that repelled children absolutely, not puzzles that invited the right kind of reckless courage. He could have monitored Quirrell more closely, treating him as a live threat rather than an eccentric colleague. He did none of these things. The plan that emerged instead was one that allowed, perhaps required, Harry to stand in that final room and prove that Lily's sacrifice still held. Lily was a charms prodigy, but the test of her work is conducted not in a laboratory, not in a controlled ritual, but on the throat and hands of her son. The grave was empty, yet the protection she crafted is validated with real burns, real bruises, real unconsciousness on cold stone. If this is year one, if this is the accepted threshold of risk for a boy just learning what he is, what does it say about Hogwarts as an institution? When the first test is an adult-level boss fight with Voldemort himself, how far can the danger escalate before someone admits that the school has mistaken survival for education? Hogwarts survives year one. That is the verdict. Not an inquiry, not a reckoning. Just survival, wrapped in scarlet and gold. 3 children walk back from the underground chambers having faced a fully embodied fragment of Voldemort, having almost died on school grounds in a confrontation no adult witnessed, and the institutional response is house points and a feast. No independent investigation into how an 11-year-old reached the stone. No permanent security overhaul of a castle that allowed a possessed professor to drink unicorn blood in the Forbidden Forest. No published accounting of failures. This is important. Because in any ordinary school, the potential body count of year one would have ended the term, ended careers, ended complacency. In the non-magical world, a single troll in a corridor would close a school for months. Governors, inspectors, safeguarding boards would descend on the building like Dementors, draining excuses instead of souls. Parents would demand to see the grave where negligence was buried. At Hogwarts, a mountain troll rampages through the castle, nearly crushes a first year in a bathroom, and by June it has become a half-humorous anecdote. A line in the story of how brave they all were. The troll is not a scandal, it is a prelude. Hogwarts is not merely a school, it is a wartime institution frozen in its own mythology. A fortress that once trained children under the shadow of Grindelwald and never truly remembered how to stand down. The culture that grows in those stone corridors treats near-death as character building. As if surviving lethal magic is an exam one must pass to be considered properly alive. The grave was empty where accountability should have been. Not Dumbledore, who had seen a child nearly burned alive by cursed fire, paused the year to ask whether the castle itself had become complicit. Not Hagrid, who had led Harry into the forest among predators and centaurs, questioned whether first years belonged anywhere near such creatures. Inside this culture, bravery is not merely praised, it is sanctified. Rule-breaking is romanticized. An 11-year-old defies curfew, lies to staff, enters a forbidden corridor, and is rewarded with public acclaim. The lesson beneath the feast is clear. If you break rules and live, you were right to do it. Children learn that survival under absurd risk is normal, that the way to earn recognition is to stand as a small, fragile replica of adult heroism in front of hazards designed to kill grown wizards. They learn that fear is something to push through, not something that might hold a necessary truth. And if Year 1 can be framed as a success story, if the narrative becomes that Hogwarts produced a hero rather than nearly losing a child, then the threshold for what counts as 2 dangerous shifts. Quietly, permanently, a basilisk in the walls will be treated as a mystery to solve, not a reason to evacuate. Dementors around the grounds will be considered a regrettable necessity, not an unthinkable violation. Dragons, cursed tournaments, open war in the corridors, each escalation will feel, to a staff already practiced in rationalization, like the next inevitable chapter rather than the moment to say no. Lily was a charms prodigy, and somewhere far from the castle she will watch these events unfold and understand what Dumbledore will not admit, that once a school decides that almost dying is acceptable collateral for greatness, it has already chosen its plan for every child who walks through its doors. The only question is how many years it will take before that choice demands a final, irreversible payment. Hogwarts had made its choice. Year 2 opened by proving it. The summer ends not with a letter of welcome, but with a barred gateway and a desperate decision. 2 12-year-old boys in an enchanted car, no adults, no backup, no plan beyond, do not be left behind. The barrier seals, the train pulls away, and the grave that should have been the Dursleys' driveway becomes the sky itself, thin air, cold wind, iron tracks below, and a scarred child gripping the wheel of a machine he barely understands. The flight is not whimsical. It is attrition. The engine strains, the magic stutters, the car lurches and drops. Below them, the Hogwarts Express is a red artery cutting through the countryside. A moving collision waiting to happen. Metal shudders, the invisibility charm flickers, and for a moment they are a bright blue target hanging above a train full of children who never knew how close they came to becoming wreckage in a field. This is important, because when the engine finally fails, it does not happen over empty moorland. It happens over the school's own grounds, in the shadow of its own castle, within reach of its own supposed protections. The car gives one last convulsion, loses all lift, and drops them not onto grass, not into water, but into the reach of a tree that has been deliberately taught to kill. The Whomping Willow is not a rumor. It is a sanctioned weapon. A school-owned, highly aggressive plant whose branches move with intent, whose blows can crack stone and crush bone, anchored a short walk from the main doors, within sight of windows where children sleep. There is no dome of shielding glass, no perimeter of wards that deflect living bodies. No engraved warning beyond a line in a handbook almost nobody reads. There is only wood and rage and the sound of a roof being punched inward as if the car were a fragile replica of safety rather than its vessel. Harry's skull could have been opened like an egg. Ron's arm could have been torn from its socket. Limbs severed, spines broken, 2 boys bleeding out on the lawn before term even began. Not Dumbledore, who had agreed to house such a thing on school grounds, comes running in time. Not Hagrid, who had once carried Harry from real ruins, is there to pull him from this manufactured one. The tree is calmed by machinery and luck, not by policy. And when the adults do arrive, the story they tell with their anger is precise. They rage about rule-breaking. They enumerate the damage to the car, the affront to the secrecy of magic, the dented, offended tree. McGonagall's voice shakes more at the thought of being seen by muggles than at the image of bodies flung from shattered windows. The near-fatal impact is an inconvenience. The breached statute is the sin. This is the truth of institutional priority. Hogwarts is more outraged by a grazed trunk than the risk of splintered skulls. More invested in the integrity of a law than the integrity of the bones of a child. The grave was empty in the hospital wing that night, not because there was no death in the air, but because survival had once again been treated as a foregone conclusion rather than a miracle. Yet even this is only prelude, only the prologue to Year Two's true horror. Because while staff scold and the willow settles back into its watchful fury, the castle's foundations remember an older magic. Beneath the flagstones, something far larger than a tree is waking, coils sliding through flooded tunnels, eyes closed, waiting for a voice it has not heard in 50 years to call it back to work. The car was only the first warning. The next threat will not stop at denting metal. Somewhere far away, Lily was a charms prodigy, and she would feel the wards shiver and know the real danger this year will come from below. The warnings begin with a cat. Mrs. Norris, stiff as marble, eyes staring at something no one else can see. Hanging like an accusation beneath the words written in what looks like blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware, this is important. Because from that moment, the school is no longer a sanctuary. It is a hunting ground, and the staff know almost nothing about the hunter. They do not know what creature is moving through the walls. They do not know how it chooses its prey. They do not know whether the next body will be merely petrified or laid out like a small, still replica in a grave no one expected to dig that term. Yet after the cat comes Colin Creevey, camera fused to his rigid hands. After Colin comes Justin Finch Fletchley, sprawled on a corridor floor beside nearly headless Nick's frozen scream. After Justin comes Hermione, books fallen, eyes wide, the brightest mind of her year reduced to a cautionary statue. Classes continue, not cancelled entirely, not evacuated to a safer place. Adjusted, shortened, chaperoned, but the fundamental decision is clear. The term will go on. The story will proceed as scheduled, even if the set is littered with unmoving children. Not Dumbledore, who had lived through one war and was quietly preparing for another, orders a full retreat. Not Hagrid, who had seen a girl die the last time the chamber opened, demands the castle be emptied until the monster is found. And in the middle of it, Harry walks the corridors and hears a voice no one else can hear. Kill. Rip tear the words slide along stone like damp breath, and Harry follows them because he is 12 and because no adult has given him a plan that is not simply attend lessons and hope. Each time he turns a corner toward that sound, it could have been his body they found instead of Colin's. Each time he lingers near pipes and shadows, the basilisk is one decision, one angle of its gaze. Away, the school notices the pattern, but draws the wrong conclusion. Whispers follow him. The boy who lived becomes the boy they fear, suspected because he is present, because he is alive where others fall. Isolation becomes another kind of danger. The child most at risk is the child least protected by his peers. Communication from the staff is sparse, cryptic, almost ceremonial. Warnings without explanations. Restrictions without truth. No one says, there may be a serpent older than your grandparents moving beneath your feet. No one says, if it looks at you directly, you will die. They wait. They wait until a message appears promising that her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever before closing the school, as if the line between acceptable and unacceptable risk is not the presence of a monster, but the confirmation of a corpse. The grave was empty, so the doors stayed open. Every petrified student is a near miss, and almost Harry, another silent proof that negligence can be merciful by accident. Somewhere beneath them, something coils and listens, and the question hangs unasked. How many rehearsals does a tragedy need before anyone admits it is a play about a child's death? The rehearsals end with blood on the wall. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. A sentence written in a child's hand, in another child's blood, across the stone like a verdict. Staff running, portraits whispering. The castle's ancient magic shuddering around a single, unbearable fact: a first-year girl has been taken. This is important, because even here, at the brink, the adults do not seal the stage. They simply widen the wings and let the children walk off into the dark. They gather in the staff room. They speak of closing the school at last, of sending everyone home before the grave beneath their feet claims another body. And then they make a choice that sounds like a plan, but is not a plan at all. The fraud will fix it. Gilderoy Lockhart, who has built his life on replicas of other men's courage, is ordered to retrieve Ginny Weasley from a monster no one else will face. Not Dumbledore, who had left the castle in the hour it most needed a headmaster. Not Hagrid, who had been taken to Azkaban in chains. No auras, no parents, just the man whose greatest talent is erasing witnesses. Harry and Ron watch this, and something inside them crystallizes. They knew, with a child's unarticulated certainty, that no rescue was coming. So they do what Hogwarts has trained them, inadvertently, to do. They step into the adult vacuum. They force Lockhart to accompany them, herd him through corridors that smell of fear, down to the bathroom where the entrance waits like a wound in the floor. The sink opens, stone grinds, the tunnel yawns, and with a fall and a rush of cold air, supervision ends. Lockhart tries one last coward's charm. His memory spell rebounds, the wand explodes, the ceiling collapses. Rock shears the passage in two. On one side, an unconscious professor whose mind is now an empty replica of itself. On the other, a 12-year-old boy, alone, walking deeper into the bowels of a school that has decided, again, that his life is an acceptable risk. The chamber is not a metaphor. It is a real place, slick with centuries of damp, lined with stone serpents that watch with carved indifference. At its heart coils a basilisk, a serpent the length of a train, scales like armor, fangs like swords. Its venom kills in minutes, its gaze kills in less. Harry stands before it with a phoenix he did not summon and a sword he has never been taught to use. No shield charm, no protective wards, no adult hand on his shoulder. What follows is not strategy. It is contingency masquerading as destiny. Fawkes blinds the basilisk, not because of any human plan, but because magic and loyalty bend for a boy who is, inexplicably, still alive. The Sorting Hat yields the sword, not through curriculum or training, but through a loophole in an old enchantment. Harry, half-blind with pain, stabs upward at precisely the right instant, driving steel through the soft flesh of a mouth that could close on him in a heartbeat. One misstep, one heartbeat slower, and the grave under Hogwarts would finally have a name. This is important. Because there was no second wave, no professors following at a distance, no search party keyed to Harry's absence. If he dies there, if Ginny's body cools beside his, if the basilisk slides back into the pipes, nothing in Hogwarts' existing pattern suggests anyone would even know where to look. The chamber would seal, the monster would sleep, the school would mourn, briefly, then reopen over a deeper, more literal grave. And somewhere far from that stone vault, parents who trusted the castle would be told a softened story about tragedy and bravery, never the truth that their children had been left to fight a 1,000-year-old weapon alone. The question lingers, heavy as the air in that underground hall. After this, what danger could possibly be considered too great to place in Harry's path? The castle did not close. That is the first unsettling fact. Children were turned to stone in its corridors, and still the doors remained open, as if the building itself refused to admit that it had become a grave that could still breathe. Dumbledore was suspended, publicly removed, politely exiled, walked out between lines of students who thought the last thin barrier between them and the dark had just been stripped away. Yet he did not rage. He did not cling to the gargoyle or protest the board's decision. He walked with that measured calm that said, more clearly than any proclamation, that this, too, had been accounted for. This is important. Because he left behind a school he knew was not merely haunted by legend, but penetrated by a very specific, very personal piece of Voldemort's past. He had read Riddle's file, had watched the boy grow in that same stone labyrinth, had heard, decades earlier, the quiet confession that there was a secret chamber and a monster under the foundations. Not Dumbledore, who had watched Tom's eyes flicker with satisfaction when he lied, could ever truly dismiss the chamber as a children's story. By Harry's second year, Dumbledore knew too much for ignorance to be an excuse. He knew the diary was not an ordinary object once it began to move events around his school. He knew the pattern of attacks echoed the old story of a girl killed and a boy rewarded. He knew that Harry spoke Parseltongue, that his scar burned, that the boy's magic resonated in ways that felt uncomfortably like riddles. A replica echoing the original, walking his corridors again. Keeping Hogwarts open then begins to look less like negligence and more like a plan. An ugly, necessary plan. The attacks create pressure. The whispers in the common room, the suspicion, the isolation, they drive Harry inward, tighten the circle of who he trusts until it is essentially himself and one or two others willing to break rules. Where adults cannot or will not descend into forgotten plumbing and ancient stone, a 12-year-old with a hero complex and a guilt he does not understand will go. Dumbledore knew this. He had watched it in the mirror of Erised room, in the forbidden third-floor corridor. In every moment, Harry chose danger over obedience. The ethics are appalling, and perhaps precisely what war makes of ethics. To confront Riddle's legacy early is to remove a 1,000-year-old weapon before Voldemort can reclaim it. To do nothing is to leave that basilisk coiled in the dark for the day its true master returns. So a child becomes the tip of the spear, his blood the test of whether the prophecy's promise has any weight in stone corridors and collapsing tunnels. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. The grave under Hogwarts would be filled with him if Dumbledore had miscalculated by a single heartbeat. If this is the safest place in the world, what, then, does Dumbledore consider acceptable danger? And when the basilisk's corpse cools and the diary is pierced, what further trials must Harry endure to satisfy an old man's endgame? The basilisk dies, the diary bleeds ink like venom, and still the answer to that question is waiting on the horizon of the next school year. Hogwarts does not grow safer, it grows colder. The train slows in a shroud of mist, windows frosting from the inside as if the carriages themselves are afraid. The lamps gutter. Breath hangs in the air. And then the first Dementor appears, a ragged, hooded silhouette gliding past the glass, a moving absence of heat and hope, searching, "This is important." These are not experimental wards in some remote fortress. These are soul-sucking entities walking the corridors of a school train filled with children. They step into Harry's compartment and the temperature plummets. The chocolate frogs go still. The world narrows to the sound of his mother screaming and the rushing void where his father's voice should be. He collapses. No one else in that carriage hears what he hears. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but the echo of the grave is inside his skull, and the Dementor drinks it in like a feast. Everyone in the story knows what Dementors are. Creatures that feed on fear and trauma, that swarm toward suffering, that have a documented history of losing control even around trained Aurors. Not Dumbledore, who had watched them for decades at Azkaban, could claim ignorance of their nature. Not Hagrid, who had seen men walk out of that prison as replicas of themselves, technically alive but emptied of everything that made them human. They are indiscriminate predators, and the Ministry stations them at every entrance to the castle as if posting guards at a gate, as if the line between protection and predation were a matter of paperwork. Hogwarts accepts this. The staff accepts this. The children are told not to provoke them, as though ordinary adolescent terror were a kind of misbehavior. Harry is not ordinary. His entire nervous system is a catalogue of unprocessed horror. Every Dementor on the grounds can feel it. On the Quidditch pitch, when they mass in the stands like a storm cloud given shape, they do not choose at random. They choose the boy whose earliest memory is green light and the smell of burning. The boy whose protections were built on a sacrificial charm and a grave that never held his parents' bodies. They reach for him and he falls from the sky. If not for Dumbledore's intervention, he would have died before he hit the ground. Pattern interrupt. The school does not remove them. Instead, Hogwarts bends itself around their presence. Harry is given a Patronus lesson, as though learning to repel soul thieves were an advanced weather charm. Students are warned, schedules adjusted, fears normalized. The Dementors remain at the gates, on the lake, drifting at the borders of every childhood nightmare. Year 3 marks a pivot. The danger is no longer only physical, trolls and spiders and serpents in the walls. It is psychological, existential. Hogwarts is now willing to gamble not just with Harry's body, but with his mind and his soul, in service of a security plan that mistakes proximity to monsters for safety. And when even that gambit fails, when the Dementors descend in a ring by the lake, what new calculus of risk will define the years to come? So, when the Dementors fail to keep their distance by the lake, Hogwarts does not retreat from danger. It climbs onto a broom and flies straight into it. The grave was empty at Godric's Hollow, but the school is very willing to dig another. The day of the match arrives under a ceiling of iron clouds. Rain falls in sheets that blur the stands into indistinct shadows, banners snapping like torn parchment in the wind. The pitch is a cauldron of noise, thousands of voices raised, as if sound alone could hold back what waits beyond the stadium lights. At the edges of the grounds, black shapes gather and hover, a ring of frozen absence. Everyone knows what they are. Everyone knows what they do. Harry rises anyway. The whistle cuts through the storm and 14 figures shoot upward. He climbs higher, chasing a glint of gold into the roiling sky, lightning far off, the air thin and cold against his face. Below, the stands are a blurred tapestry of colour and movement. Above, there is only cloud, and the knowledge unspoken, but very much alive, that somewhere beneath those clouds, the Dementors are watching. This is important. The staff know Harry collapses in their presence. They have seen him fall on the train, heard the way his mind is dragged backwards to the night his parents died. They know his particular vulnerability, and they still sanction a game that sends him hundreds of feet into the air, without any charm or barrier between his body and the ground. The moment of attack is not dramatic in the way Quidditch usually is. There is no collision, no foul, no spectacular dive. There is only a sudden suffocating cold that cuts through rain and robes and bone. His vision tunnels. The roar of the crowd recedes and is replaced by a woman's scream, by a man's desperate voice, by green light. His parents' last moments flood his mind, not as memory, but as ongoing reality. The snitch vanishes, the sky tips. He is falling before he understands that he has lost consciousness. Adults watch from the stands. Not Dumbledore, who had approved the Dementors' presence and trusted in their discipline. Not Hagrid, who had told Harry they were there for his protection. Others watch, wands in hand, too far away, too slow. For a long, terrible heartbeat, the only thing between a 14-year-old boy and his grave is distance. He wakes in the hospital wing, bones intact by the narrowest of margins. Broom shattered into splinters at the base of the stands, as if the wood absorbed the impact meant for him. The near-death is translated almost immediately into narrative. A frightening incident. A brave boy. A regrettable overstep by the Dementors. What does not happen is more revealing than what does. Quidditch continues. The Dementors remain. There is no structural change, no new protective lattice of magic over the pitch. No serious reconsideration of whether a school under siege should be staging aerial tournaments at all. In miniature, this is Hogwarts. Even when the risk is obvious, even when the danger has already drawn blood, tradition and spectacle prevail over the quiet, unglamorous work of keeping children alive. The story must go on. The plan must hold. And Harry, still believing his parents lie safely in a grave, is expected to climb back on the broom. The next year, the calculus will grow even harsher as the school trades storm clouds and Dementors for dragons, contracts, and a tournament with a documented body count. The dragons and contracts will come. First, there is a year built on the fear of a single man. A name spoken in whispers, as if sound itself might draw him closer. Sirius Black has escaped Azkaban. The story that moves through Hogwarts is simple, brutal, and wrong. He is a mass murderer, Voldemort's most devoted lieutenant, a fanatic who blew a street apart and laughed in the smoke. The Ministry tells Dumbledore that Black is hunting one person. Harry Potter. This is important, because once that premise is accepted, every choice that follows becomes an indictment of the castle that pretends to be a sanctuary. The response is theatrical. Dementors ring the grounds, their grave chill seeping through stone and skin. Portraits mutter. Teachers lower their voices. Doors are locked, passwords changed, patrols doubled. Hogwarts is presented as a fortress, ancient magic and modern vigilance woven together into an unbreakable warded shell. Children are told they are safe as long as they stay inside the walls. And then the walls mean nothing. Black slashes the fat lady's portrait, shredding canvas and pride in a single stroke, forcing the entire Gryffindor house to sleep in the Great Hall under staff supervision. He does not breach a door, he erases the symbol of the door. The school reacts with outrage, with shock, with more passwords and more patrols. But no one can explain the simple truth. A supposed madman has reached the heart of the tower without setting off a single meaningful alarm. Not Dumbledore, who had layered the castle with protections older than most countries. Not Hagrid, who had always believed the grounds themselves would rise to defend the children. Not Sirius, who had once sworn he would die before letting harm come to his godson, and now moves like a shadow through the very corridors that raised them all. He enters the Gryffindor dormitory. He stands over Ron's bed with a knife so close that the wrong mattress, the wrong breath, the wrong twitch of a sleeping arm would have put him within arm's reach of Harry. This is not the distant menace of a dark lord in exile. This is a man inside a room inches from the boy the entire plan is allegedly built to protect. Classes continue. Hogsmeade trips are negotiated. Permission slips become a greater obstacle than a reputed killer. The message to the children is contradictory and cruel. You are in mortal danger. But you must also sit your exams, attend care of magical creatures, and practice your Patronus on the very Dementors who might one day take your soul. The grave was empty, but the illusion of safety is full to overflowing. Lily was a charms prodigy, and somewhere beyond the wards she watches the Marauder's map flicker with a name that should be impossible, realizes that the man the school fears is not the true predator at all. Yet even a wrongly accused godfather walks these halls at will. If Hogwarts cannot keep Sirius Black out, what will it do when the real monster comes home? The answer waits in the maze of a tournament that should never have been revived. The tournament should have stayed buried. Its grave was marked in the quiet language of ministry reports and unspoken tradition. Too many students dead, too much blood spilled for the sake of spectacle. This is important. When a magical institution has already decided a competition is too lethal to continue. Reviving it is not nostalgia, it is intent. The Triwizard Tournament had been discontinued after repeated fatalities. That was the story older professors remembered and did not quite tell, the truth that hung behind phrases like glorious history and ancient tradition. Young champions had faced dragons, dark lakes, cursed labyrinths, and not all had come back alive. The grave was empty, only in the sense that no one visited it anymore. The memory of those deaths had been tidied away, sealed like a forgotten charm in a locked drawer. Dumbledore opened that drawer. He invited Beauxbatons and Durmstrang to bring their best, turned Hogwarts into a stage draped in banners and foreign colours, and called it Unity. The Great Hall became a ceremonial arena. The lake and the grounds were repurposed as sites of trial. Students were not merely allowed to enter, They were encouraged to dream of it, to write their names on scraps of parchment and offer them to a cup that burned like a small contained star. The castle that had failed to keep a supposed murderer out now volunteered its children for dragons. There were no real reforms, no catalogue of new safety enchantments, no visible system of magical kill switches that would end a task the moment a heartbeat faltered. The only widely discussed protection was an age line, a ring of light on a stone floor, as if 17 were a shield against fire and drowning and curses. Lily was a charms prodigy, and she would have recognized the flaw at once. Any barrier that believes what parchment says can be deceived. The Goblet of Fire did not examine souls. It read names. The cultural framing did the rest. In the common rooms, students whispered about glory and placed quiet bets on who would be chosen. In the stands, they screamed as dragons took flight, as if a boy on a broom before living fire was simply another Quidditch match. Adults watched a child dive into a black lake where merpeople clutched hostages by the throat and called it bravery when he surfaced gasping. Near-death was not an accident of war now. It was entertainment. Not Dumbledore, who had seen too many young bodies laid out after battle, stepped between Harry and the binding magic of the goblet once his name emerged. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins of Godric's Hollow, insisted that no, this boy had been promised a different kind of life. Not Sirius, who had just been restored to Godfather in truth, tore the world apart to remove him from the line of fire. The plan of the adults, spoken or not, was obedience. The contract is binding, the task must be done. This is the year Hogwarts crosses a line. Before, danger seeped through cracks, trolls, basilisks, Dementors at the gates. Now the peril is written into the calendar, dressed in ceremony, applauded from the stands. The school does not merely fail to protect its students. It schedules their suffering and calls it tradition, preparing the ground for a final war that will no longer pretend to be an accident. The arena proves it. The pretense falls away. At last, Hogwarts stops pretending that death is an accident. They build a pit for it. High stone walls, sheer and enclosing, turn the Quidditch pitch into a grave the school hopes will remain symbolic. Stands rise in tiers, packed with students and staff and visiting officials, their voices a roaring tide above the crackle of contained fire. 4 dragons are dragged into place, one by one, chains clanking, muzzles smoking, each magnificent, each enraged, each coiled around a single golden egg. This is important. The task is not a surprise attack. It is choreography. It is scheduled. The story they tell themselves is that this is tradition, that this is magic at its most glorious and terrible, that courage must be proved against something that can end you. But the truth is simpler and colder. They have placed children in an arena with apex predators and sold seats. Harry's turn comes last. He steps into the stone bowl to face the Hungarian horntail, and the world narrows to spikes and flame. The horntail is not merely dangerous, it is designed by nature and breeding to kill quickly and thoroughly, with a spiked tail that can shatter bone and a gout of fire hot enough to melt stone and glass. He is 14 years old, small for his age, a boy whose voice has barely settled, standing alone beneath a creature that has outlived generations. The contrast is obscene. That is the point. He cannot walk away. The binding magic of the goblet has been accepted as law, as if a cup of blue fire outranks conscience. To refuse would mean scandal, international incident, the weight of accusation that he is cowardly, ungrateful, a fraud. The rules do not merely invite him to participate, they close around him like a clasped hand. Whether he is ready, whether he is willing, is irrelevant. He will face dragonfire or he will be ruined. Possibly both. Adults ring the arena like a living ward. Judges in ornate robes, teachers in their house colors, ministry officials with their quills and scorecards. Wands are drawn, but only for after, for healing, for containment. Not Dumbledore, who had years to end this tournament and did not. Not Hagrid, who had led Harry to see the dragons with a kind of awe that blurred the line between marvel and warning. Not Sirius, who had raged from a distance yet remained a voice in a fireplace, not a body on the field. They watch. They calculate. They are ready to intervene if the boy is about to die, but not before he has been properly endangered, not before the spectacle has reached its crescendo. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here it waits, invisible, in the shape of a misjudged dodge, a broken broom, a second too slow. This is not a freak mishap. It is a ticketed possibility. Harry's potential death by dragon has been priced into the program. Another line in a century-old plan that teaches children to meet annihilation with applause. The lake is quieter than the dragon arena. Quieter, and in some ways crueler. The crowd roars above, but beneath the surface, Harry moves through greenlit gloom. Lungs replaced by borrowed gills that tick down an invisible clock. The second task is framed as rescue, as chivalry, as a lesson in priorities. In practice, it is a boy anchored to the bottom of a freezing Scottish lake for an hour, surrounded by merpeople with spears and drifting clusters of grindylows whose fingers are designed to drag. The margin for error is a misjudged charm, a miscounted minute. A plant that catches his ankle when the gills begin to burn away. This is important. Drowning here would not be a freak catastrophe. It would be a permissible outcome, written into the rules of an ancient game that Hogwarts has chosen to resurrect. By the third task, the pretense of spectacle has thinned. The maze rises on the Quidditch pitch like a living grave. Hedges towering high enough to swallow sound, sight, and any hope of swift intervention. Harry walks into a corridor of rustling leaves and muffled screams, and the school calls it education. Creatures lurk in blind corners. Curses wait on the ground like buried teeth. Visibility is a memory. Oversight is a theory, not Dumbledore, who had seen a basilisk slip through plumbing and Dementors drift over school grounds, can possibly believe this is controlled. Somewhere in the stands, adults watch the outer walls of the maze and pretend that watching the perimeter is the same as protecting the child at its heart. They cannot see the exact moment when the Triwizard Cup stops being a trophy and becomes a weapon. The portkey is a simple twist of magic, an old travel charm turned inside out. It looks harmless, gleaming in the half-light, the promised end of the ordeal. Harry and Cedric touch it together. The world tears sideways. The pitch vanishes, the graveyard arrives. It is here that the illusion of control dies. Cold stone. Tilted angels. Names carved into rock that mean nothing to Harry until his back hits his own father's grave. He is bound, he is cut, blood steams in the cauldron. He watches as a thing like a flayed infant sinks into potion and rises a man. Voldemort is reborn while a school hymn still echoes faintly in Harry's ears. The duel that follows is not romantic. It is noise and recoil and stone exploding into shrapnel. The killing curse misses by inches and obliterates tombstones instead. The shock hurling Harry sideways, ribs bruised, wands slipping in sweat. He survives only because of a rare magical phenomenon. Twin cores singing in resonance, and because the wand of a dead boy answers his call across the grave. When he returns, he arrives with a corpse. Cedric's body hits Hogwarts grass, and the story should stop. Instead, the machinery of school life strains to resume, as if a child has not just been used as bait in a ritual murder. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here, the grave has been outsourced to a curriculum. How long can that lie stand before it breaks? And when it breaks, who will dare admit they knew? They knew. Or at least, they suspected enough that ignorance became a choice. This is important. Because once Cedric's body lies on Hogwarts grass, the pattern of Harry's schooling can no longer be dismissed as misfortune. It begins to look like design. Consider the first move in Dumbledore's long game, hiding the Philosopher's Stone inside a castle full of children. Not in a Gringotts vault, not in a warded grave beneath his own office, but beneath trapdoors and lethal enchantments that an 11-year-old can reach by following a trail of clues. The stone is bait for Voldemort's fragment, yes, but the corridor that leads to it is also a corridor that leads Harry exactly where Dumbledore needs him to go, face to face with the thing that murdered his parents. Under controlled conditions, with teachers' protections arranged like invisible scaffolding. Year 2. The pattern deepens. The chamber opens. Students are petrified. The school does not close. Dumbledore delays. Watching, Hogwarts becomes a contained battlefield, a sealed experiment in fear and courage, in which one boy who speaks Parseltongue is pushed toward a basilisk older than the castle itself. A sword appears in a hat. A phoenix brings healing tears. The child survives. The headmaster learns what kind of child he is dealing with. By the time the Triwizard Tournament is invited into the castle, the history of fatal tasks is not a secret. It is the point. Dumbledore signs Hogwarts up to host a competition that has killed students before. Then, when Harry's name emerges from the goblet, he does not end the farce. He cites binding magic. He speaks of rules. He allows a 14-year-old to face dragons and drowning and a graveyard. Each crisis draws Voldemort or his agents closer, strips away another layer of concealment, and forces Harry to rehearse, again and again, the posture of walking into death and coming back alive. What does Dumbledore gain by this? Intelligence. Time. Proof. Every attack on Hogwarts reveals more of Voldemort's strategy. The weak points in his body, his Horcruxes, the loyalty of his followers. Every year of survival hardens Harry, turns raw grief into practiced defiance, teaches him to cast Patronus and Parseltongue and unforgivable curses in everything but name. The boy becomes less a student and more a weapon being honed. Dumbledore's own words betray the philosophy beneath the plan. He speaks of choice, of preparing Harry for what lies ahead, of the necessity that Harry die at the right moment so that the fragment in his scar can be destroyed. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. The sacrifice there was a replica of death, a charm stretched over a crib. Here, at Hogwarts, the sacrifice is rehearsed in earnest, each school year a tighter noose around the same conclusion. In that light, Hogwarts itself becomes part of the training. A controlled war zone, a place where trauma is curriculum and survival is examination. Not Dumbledore, who had watched wars consume generations already, could entirely resist the temptation to believe that one more child marked for death might be the answer. At what point does mentorship become manipulation? When does a headmaster entrusted with the lives of hundreds cross the line with the one boy who trusts him completely and would follow him into any darkness, even if that darkness is his own grave? And if the line was crossed years before the final battle, who now will say it aloud? The answer, in 5th year, is that almost no one will say it aloud, because something more insidious has taken the field. The war stops being only wands and curses. It becomes a war for the story itself. This is important. Voldemort has returned. Harry has seen him, felt his breath in a graveyard where a boy died at his feet, watched the Dark Lord rise from a cauldron like something dragged back from a ruined grave. He comes back to Hogwarts carrying that night in his bones. And the Ministry's response, Fudge's response, is not to fortify the castle, not to protect the children, but to decide that the greatest threat is the truth spoken by a 15-year-old who will not stop insisting that he is not mad. So Hogwarts becomes a front line without rubble, a battlefield of minds. Educational decrees nailed to the walls like quiet little curses, each one narrowing the space in which reality is allowed to exist. The plan is simple and devastating. Isolate the witness, discredit the story, make the school itself an instrument of forgetting. Enter Dolores Umbridge in pink and lace, a Ministry replica of care. She is not a Death Eater in a mask. She does not need the Cruciatus curse. Her cruelty is bureaucratic, written in ink and policy, the kind of violence that smiles as it signs. Not Dumbledore, who had once promised that help would always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask, but a different head of the classroom now, one who believes that the most dangerous magic is information. In her defense lessons, there is no defense, only denial. No practical spells, only the insistence that Voldemort is not alive, that Harry is a liar, that the graveyard was a delusion born of attention-seeking and instability. This is institutional gaslighting, raised to an art. Make the boy doubt his own memory, then make everyone else doubt him too. If enough people repeat the lie, does the grave stop existing? Detention becomes the purest expression of her method. A quill, no ink. A simple charm woven through it. Harry writes, "I must not tell lies," and the words carve themselves into his skin over and over, the blood itself becoming the ink, the back of his hand a living palimpsest of punishment. The wound closes, but the message remains. There is no scream, no flash of green light, only the slow, methodical teaching of a lesson. Your truth will cost you your body. And who stops it? Not Dumbledore, who had withdrawn into distance and silence, convinced that separation is safety. Not Hagrid, who had always been Harry's first refuge. Not Sirius, who had once sworn that Harry would never be hurt again if he could help it. Staff suspect. Some know. No one intervenes with the ferocity the situation deserves. The institution closes ranks around its own authority. This year's near-death is not a falling body or a killing curse. It is the attempted murder of credibility, the suffocation of hope, the slow erosion of Harry's belief that adults will stand between him and the darkness, In another story, the one where there is no secret war room in Cornwall, no parents who knew and watched and bled over every headline, this might have been the year he did not rise again, not because his heart stopped, but because his will did. Yet even as the walls close in, something else stirs in the hidden spaces of the castle. In empty classrooms and whispered meetings, resistance is born in the very mind they are trying to break. Resistance is born in whispers, in corridors, in empty classrooms where children practice stunning spells instead of homework. But Hogwarts has another classroom, older than stone and syllabus, where lessons are written in hoofprints and blood. The Forbidden Forest is not a metaphor. It is a lethal wilderness pressed up against a boarding school, separated from the dormitories by little more than a lawn and a line of trees. This is important. When Dolores Umbridge marches Harry and Hermione beneath those branches at night, she is not merely assigning detention, she is crossing a boundary the castle pretends is real and everyone knows is porous. She walks with a lantern and a plan. She believes she is hunting Hagrid, believes she will expose his supposed treachery by using students as bait. Believes the forest is dangerous in the abstract but containable because she is an adult with a ministry title and a wand. Not Dumbledore, who had once trusted this same forest enough to send 11-year-olds into it hunting a unicorn killer. Steps in front of her, no one stops her at all. They go deeper, the light shrinks, the trees close in like ribs around a grave. And then the centaurs come. The centaur's anger is not sudden, it is sedimentary. Years of being classified as beasts rather than beings, years of ministry interference, years of humans treating their territory as a convenient backdrop for detention and adventure, all layered and compacted until the slightest pressure fractures it. They emerge with bows already strung, arrows already nocked, voices already raised. Umbridge calls them filthy half-breeds and threatens them with her wand, and the history of every insult ever carved into their status ignites at once. They are powerful. They are armed. They are not bound by school rules or house points or Dumbledore's benevolent speeches in the Great Hall. In that clearing, there is no headmaster, no board of governors, no protective charm woven by a woman who loved her child. There is only an armed, furious, non-human community and a teacher who has just delivered 2 students into their hands like offerings. The scene does not become a massacre, but it could have. One slipped arrow in the dark, one panicked movement, one hoofle in the wrong place, one body trampled and left cooling in the undergrowth while the forest closes over the disturbance. No patrol would have found them in time. The search parties would have reached the tree line and stopped, staring into that blackness, and the official story would have been an accident, a tragedy, a regrettable risk. The grave was empty, but the danger was not. The line between school and lethal wilderness is only a few steps past the tree line, and again the adults of Hogwarts weaponize that proximity, turning geography into discipline, turning fear into pedagogy. And somewhere far away, 2 parents who are still alive, who knew every contour of that forest from old marauder maps and late-night wanderings, watch the report flicker across their monitoring charms and understand how close their son has come, once more, to vanishing between the trees. What happens when the forest stops giving him back? The forest stops giving him back the moment Hogwarts decides it no longer needs to. The moment the castle and the adults who rule it accept that if death comes for these children, the children must learn to meet it wand first. So the walls themselves open. A door that was not there appears because desperate students walk past 3 times wishing for a place to fight. The room of requirement answers, not with cushions and textbooks, but with dummies, cushions charred by misfired curses, and a silence that feels like a grave waiting to be filled. This is important. Teenagers stand in a hidden chamber and practice disarming, shielding, stunning, under the guidance of another teenager who has seen more lethal magic than most auras. They call it Dumbledore's Army. The name is a joke, and not a joke at all. Under Umbridge's pink tyranny, where defensive magic has been reduced to ink on parchment and fear of expulsion, they reclaim something that had been systematically stripped from them. Agency. Wands are drawn. Spells are whispered, then spoken, then shouted. Neville's shaking hand steadies. Hermione's precise incantations become a rhythm others can follow. Shy younger students feel the first clean shock of a successful shield charm slamming a stunner aside. They are building community in defiance of a woman who believes obedience is safety. It feels empowering, because it is. For the first time since the grave news of Voldemort's return, they are not merely waiting for the next headline or the next decree. They are alive to one another, alive to their own potential, and the room reflects that life back at them, shifting, expanding, conjuring cushions when they fall, and practice dummies when they no longer wish to aim at friends. In this hidden place, Hogwarts finally looks like the school they thought they had been promised, and yet, step back, strip away the camaraderie and the warm candlelight. What is this, if not the quiet, terrible image of child soldiers training for a war the adults have failed to prevent? No aura oversight, no healer on standby, no Dumbledore, who had once claimed that help would always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. They asked. The answer was detention and quills that carved words into skin. So they asked the castle itself, and the castle complied. Harry stands at the center of it all. 15 years old, scar-aching, nightmares thick, with grave dirt and green light, and yet he moves through the room like a weary instructor. He demonstrates Expelliarmus again and again, corrects stances, absorbs their faith in him with a kind of exhausted politeness. He has become a de facto combat teacher, not because he wished for authority, but because everyone else stepped back from the line. Not Hagrid, who had once carried him from the ruins. Not Sirius, who had once promised him a home. The weight of preparation settles on his shoulders as surely as any invisibility cloak. By this point, Hogwarts has done something subtle and devastating. It has outsourced its most basic duty, keeping its students safe, to the students themselves. The story being written in that room is simple and ruthless. You must be ready to fight, and you must be ready to die, and if you are not, then you are already lost. Lily was a charms prodigy, and somewhere far away she watches the monitoring ink spike as her son teaches children to aim for the chest and not the hand, and understands that the grave was empty so that this could happen. What happens when an entire generation is taught that survival is extra credit, not the baseline promise of a school? By 6th year, the lesson has settled into Harry's bones. Survival is not guaranteed. It is a grade. It is something you can fail. And Hogwarts, the castle that was supposed to be sanctuary, has become a place where lethal magic flows through corridors as naturally as gossip. The grave was empty, but the school is full of things that can kill a child with a touch. Katie Bell does not open the package. She only brushes it. Cloth against skin, mitten against paper, and the curse ignites like a silent scream. Her body leaves the ground, limbs contorted into angles that should not exist in a living girl. Her mouth pulled wide around a sound that tears at the air. Snow, stone, and sky blur around her as she levitates and thrashes, a puppet jerked by invisible wire. This is important. The necklace was purchased in a shop, carried through Hogsmeade, and walked straight toward the castle without any system, any charm, any adult eye that could say, "This will destroy a student before dinner." Ron's poisoning is even quieter. No cursed package, no howling wind on a winter path, just a bottle of mead meant as a gift, resting benignly in Slughorn's office while the professor dithers and reminisces. A toast is suggested. A sip is taken. The poison moves faster than thought. Ron's body seizes, convulsions racking him, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth as his eyes roll back and his lungs forget how to draw breath. The room contracts to a single point, Harry forcing the bezoar between his friend's teeth because he remembers one offhand comment in a first lesson. Slughorn owns the bezoar, but it is Harry's desperation that makes it matter. Without that, Ronald Weasley dies on the floor of a teacher's office in the safest school in Britain. And still, the story inside the castle frames these as puzzles, not prosecutions. Who cursed the necklace? Who tampered with the drink? The questions are framed like examinations, not like indictments of an institution that cannot keep poisoned gifts and cursed jewelry from passing through its walls. Not Dumbledore, who had watched year after year of near-fatal incidents, seems willing to say aloud that the pattern itself is the problem. Meanwhile, Draco Malfoy stands in a bathroom, turning porcelain and steam into a laboratory of desperation. He works with fiendfire and cursed cabinets, with dark magic that scars his own body and nearly kills another student when Sectum Sempra meets Skin. No one searches his wand, no one searches his bag. The castle assumes that what happens in tiled rooms and hidden corridors is private, even as blood spreads across the floor. By now, near death is background noise. A cursed necklace in Hogsmeade, poisoned mead in an office, experimental curses in a lavatory, they circulate like contraband in a prison, always finding their way toward Harry's orbit, always ready to make him collateral. Lily was a charms prodigy, and somewhere far away she watches the ink of her monitoring spells spike again and again, knowing that the plan to leave him at Hogwarts has placed him in a fortress that cannot tell the difference between education and slow, acceptable sacrifice. If this is what protected looks like, what will it mean when the war finally tears the castle open completely? The answer comes on a night when the war stops knocking and simply walks through the front door. It begins with a piece of furniture, a cabinet in a nocturne alley shop, and its wounded twin hidden in a school where children sleep. The vanishing cabinets are not legend or metaphor. They are infrastructure. A secret corridor carved through space and ward. A crack in the supposed strongest fortress in Britain. This is important, because when Draco Malfoy finally repairs that crack, what steps through is not a single assassin, but a column of Death Eaters emerging already inside the castle's lungs. They do not breach the gates, they bypass them. One moment Borgin and Burke's is merely a grim curiosity in a darkened alley. The next, its cabinet exhales masked figures into the room of requirement, and the castle's ancient magic does not scream. No alarm, no shudder in the stones. The story that Hogwarts tells about itself, about safety and unassailable protection, is revealed as a replica of security rather than the thing itself. Students are still in the building. Some are shepherded toward evacuation routes, but many remain in their dormitories, ordered to stay put, little more than stationary targets behind thin curtains and thinner doors. Spells begin to fly in corridors they walked that afternoon to Charms and Transfiguration. Stone explodes, glass shatters. A single mis-aimed curse, a collapsing staircase, and an entire house's worth of children could die in their sleep without ever seeing who killed them. Not Dumbledore, who had called this place safer than all the Gringotts vaults, can protect them now. The war is not outside the walls anymore, it is echoing along the very banisters first years cling to. Above it all, at the highest accessible point of the school, the astronomy tower becomes an execution platform. Dumbledore stands there, disarmed, his wand wrenched away by the boy he has been grooming both as weapon and as sacrifice. Harry, rigid under a body bind, lies beneath the invisibility cloak at his feet, forced into the role of witness, unable to move, unable to intervene, breathing the same cold air as the men who have come to murder his headmaster on school property. Death Eaters circle Dumbledore like vultures around a grave that has not yet been dug. The systemic breach is total. The wards that once repelled armies, the staff vigilance sharpened by years of near catastrophe, the elaborate security measures that followed every prior incident. All of them failed to prevent a small army of terrorists from staging an assassination on the roof of a boarding school. The castle that housed trolls, basilisks, dementors, dragons and cursed objects now hosts open warfare. The grave was empty where Hogwarts' reputation for safety should have been. This is not an aberration. It is the culmination of a long slide. Year by year, line by line, the acceptable level of risk has risen until there is no line left at all. Hogwarts, once whispered about as the safest place in Britain, is now indistinguishable from any other battlefield in the Second Wizarding War. And somewhere far away, watching monitoring charms spike into panic, James and Lily understand that their plan has failed in a way even they did not foresee. Because if the castle itself has become a war zone with children trapped inside, what happens when the war stops merely invading Hogwarts, and Hogwarts becomes the war's final chosen ground? Hogwarts does not merely host the war in Harry's 7th year. It is occupied. It is a castle under new management, and the new management believes fear is more efficient than walls. Snape wears the title of headmaster, but authority in the corridors belongs to the Carrows. Amicus and Alecto are not teachers in any meaningful sense. They are wardens given classrooms and allowed to call their cruelty curriculum. Defense against the dark arts is gone. In its place, dark arts openly taught, the line between lesson and indoctrination erased. This is important. Detention is no longer a threat of quills or polishing trophies, it is the promise of blood, the Cruciatus Curse used as a disciplinary charm. The scream of a child echoing down stone halls built for music. The daily reality of students becomes a quiet, grinding siege. The high table looks the same from a distance, but the atmosphere is wrong, soured, like food left too long beside a grave. Corridors are patrolled like prison blocks, Carrows stalking the staircases. Older Slytherins deputized into something uncomfortably close to paramilitary monitors. Muggle-borns are dragged from lessons, interrogated, humiliated, made into public warnings. Those who remain are forced to copy out lies about Muggle theft of magic while the Carrows walk behind them, wands idly tracing the air, choosing at random whom to hurt next. Children are beaten for backtalk. They are cursed for wrong answers. They are ordered to cast Cruciatus on each other in class, told that refusal is treason, that mercy is disobedience. Some obey and shatter. Some refuse and break. The castle that once failed at safety through negligence now succeeds at terror through design. Harry is absent for most of this year, and that absence is its own dark mirror. The boy the school once nearly killed by accident is now outside its walls while it deliberately brutalizes those who stayed. The institution that shaped him, that Dumbledore once defended as a sanctuary, is openly training children as instruments of Voldemort's ideology. Not Dumbledore, who had trusted that Hogwarts itself would resist corruption. Not Hagrid, who had always spoken of the castle as home. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of a future where Harry could be merely a student. None of them had planned for this, a Hogwarts that is alive, but morally hollowed out, a replica of a school wrapped around a labor camp, and yet, under the floorboards of this occupation, resistance grows. Neville, Ginny, Luna, and others turn corridors into ambush sites and staircases into traps. Snape looks the other way more often than chance should allow, but the danger is real. Every act of sabotage risks execution disguised as punishment. The Room of Requirement becomes a hidden village, sheltering first years too frightened to sleep in their dormitories, feeding them, teaching them real defense, while above, roll calls are taken and names go unanswered. By this point, Hogwarts has completed its transformation from school to war zone. Every student who remains walks with the knowledge that any day could be their last lesson, their last meal, their last descent into the dungeons. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but the metaphorical graves inside this castle are filling. Innocence, trust, the idea that education is separate from war. When the final battle comes, it will not feel like an invasion. It will feel like the inevitable conclusion of a siege that began the moment the Carrows first took attendance. What does it mean, then, that the place meant to protect children has become the battlefield itself, and that Harry, returning at last, must treat his school not as refuge, but as the most dangerous front of the war? In the end, Hogwarts answers that question with stone and blood. The walls do not crack in theory. They crack in thunder. Giants wade into the courtyards where children once dragged trunks and owl cages, their clubs smashing flagstones, sending fountains of enchanted rubble into the air. From the Forbidden Forest, the spiders pour out in a black, chittering tide, swarming over lawns that had hosted picnics and Quidditch celebrations. This is important. The same grass that remembered first kisses now remembers the sound of bone breaking. Spells strafe the corridors like artillery. Curses ricochet off portraits whose painted inhabitants flee from frame to frame, shrieking warnings, while tapestries catch fire and burn in slow, silken agony. Staircases twist mid-duel, hurling combatants into new angles of attack. The geography of childhood becomes the geometry of war, every familiar corner reinterpreted as cover, choke point, killing ground. In the great hall, where first years had once trembled under floating candles and sorting songs, lines of fighters clash beneath a bewitched ceiling that mirrors a sky lit not by stars, but by jets of sickly green and blinding red. The library, that sanctuary of quiet ink and parchment, fills with the crack of shattering shelves as curses blast through stacks, sending replicas of ancient knowledge spinning through the air like birds with broken wings. Bodies fall on staircases where first years had giggled on their way to charms, their blood tracking down stone steps worn smooth by centuries of student feet. And among them move children. Not all the underage students leave. Some stay because they are stubborn, some because they are loyal, some because they have nowhere safer to go. They clutch wands with hands that once clutched chocolate frog cards, standing shoulder to shoulder with professors and parents in hallways that had hosted gossip, pranks, and exam panic. Hogwarts has placed its pupils on the front line of a war they did not start and cannot fully understand, and no one stops it. Not Dumbledore, who had always believed that facing danger young could temper courage. Not Hagrid, who had always trusted the castle to look after its own. Harry runs through this ruin like a thread pulled through a shroud. He sprints past the entrance to the kitchens, where he had once begged for treacle tart, now slick with dust and blood. He passes the classroom where he learned to levitate feathers, ducking a killing curse that scorches the stone above the blackboard. Every corridor is a memory. Every memory is a target. The place that raised him is also the place most likely to kill him. And he knew, with a clarity sharper than fear, that the castle's love had always been edged with lethal risk. The grave was empty, but the school is full of the dying. In these final hours, Hogwarts stops pretending. It is not a school with dangerous incidents. It is a battlefield that once happened to teach children, and the magic that shaped them now decides who lives long enough to see what remains when the dust finally settles. The battle only makes visible what Hogwarts has been doing to Harry since he was 11. The walls do not simply witness his courage. They train it, they refine it, they weaponize it. In first year, he is a child who hesitates. He argues with Hermione in the corridor, voice shaking, insisting they ought to tell a teacher about the stone. He is appalled by the three-headed dog, sickened by the idea that this is normal school magic. Yet he still goes down the trapdoor. The pattern begins there, in the space between terror and action, where an 11-year-old decides that if adults will not move, he must. By second year, the hesitation has thinned. He does not wait for permission to follow the spiders into the Forbidden Forest, does not truly believe anyone else will face the monster hunting Muggleborns. Third year, he sprints across the grounds toward Dementors. Fourth year, he stops protesting his forced entry into the tournament and instead learns how to outfly a dragon. The boy who once whispered, "We should tell someone," becomes the teenager who assumes that if something lethal is happening at Hogwarts, he will be the one to stand in front of it. This is important, because the castle does not merely allow this reflex, it rewards it. House points fall like blessings after each survival. Gryffindor banners unfurl in a blaze of scarlet when he returns from the Chamber of Secrets. Teachers who should be horrified instead offer quiet praise, private smiles, late-night tea in a headmaster's office that smells of lemon drops and strategy. Not Dumbledore, who had watched the pattern form. Ever says the one sentence that might have broken it, "You are a child. This is not your job." The peer culture follows the staff. Harry is admired not for homework or quiet kindness, but for flying headlong into Quidditch storms, for dueling older students, for walking into the graveyard and coming back alive. His survival becomes a kind of currency, proof that risking his life is not only acceptable but expected. The grave was empty, and the school builds a living monument instead, a boy who cannot imagine stepping back. Other students do not move this way. They scream when the troll appears. They flee Dementors. They cling to the edges of the Triwizard stands, grateful it is not their name in the fire. The story does not center their caution. It centers the one child who treats his own continued existence as negotiable. And somewhere far away, two parents watching through stolen channels of magic see what Hogwarts is doing to their son. Lily was a charms prodigy, and she recognizes conditioning when she sees it. A boy who has normalized near-death will find it easier when the time comes to walk into a deeper forest and accept a quieter kind of ending. Hogwarts never tells Harry to die. It teaches him that his life is a tool, sharpened on corridors and Quidditch pitches ready to be spent. Dumbledore quietly relies on that. Voldemort exploits it. But someone else has been counting the moments, measuring how far the castle can bend Harry before he finally breaks. Because if a school can train a sacrificial hero, then a mother who refuses the grave can train something else. A counter-sacrifice. And that plan is almost ready. The plan is almost ready, and the castle that keeps trying to kill him is still being called a school. In the ordinary world, the word means something different. A school has locked doors and controlled access. Adults whose names are checked against registries, fire drills, evacuation routes, written protocols for everything from a broken arm to a bomb threat. When something serious happens, there are reports, inquiries, external inspectors with the power to close the gates. This is important. The baseline expectation is simple. Children come home alive. Now place that expectation over Hogwarts in year one like a transparency over a grave. The picture does not line up. An adult troll walks into the building on Halloween and roams the corridors. There is no lockdown, no roll call, no coordinated sweep. An 11-year-old boy and his friends find the creature before any trained defender does. The same year, a lethal artifact is hidden inside the school, surrounded not by distance and secrecy, but by a series of lethal puzzles that can be solved, step by step, by first years who are curious and unsupervised. Not Dumbledore, who had lived through one war and was quietly preparing for another. Calls the auras. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from the ruins of Godric's Hollow, files an incident report. There is no external investigation into why a known terrorist can reach the third floor and share a body with a teacher. Why a child can pass a three-headed dog, living fire, and a chamber full of unstable flying keys. By the standards of any real institution, the moment Quirrell dies in that underground room, the school's license to exist dies with him. Pattern interrupt. Imagine the Board of Governors as Muggle parents. Imagine Ofsted walking through the Great Hall and reading the year's casualty list. Year 2 begins with a whisper about a monster and ends with a basilisk stalking pipes and walls, leaving a trail of petrified children and a cat hung like a warning. No evacuation. No closure until the end. A 12-year-old descends into a buried chamber with a broken wand and a songbird and faces the memory of Tom Riddle alone. In the ordinary world, that is not a tragic accident. It is prosecutable negligence. After a second year of mortal peril, the building would be shuttered. Administrators questioned under oath, parents in open revolt at the thought of sending their children back. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but in any sane system, the graveyard would be Hogwarts itself. Instead, the wizarding world closes ranks. Insular, self-policing, half at war even in peacetime, it treats survival as vindication. The children came back, therefore the magic held, therefore the system works. Lily was a charms prodigy, and watching from Cornwall she can see the pattern with cruel clarity. A culture that has normalized catastrophe will always call it acceptable risk. By that measure, Hogwarts is not merely a bit dangerous. It is catastrophically unsafe, an engine that manufactures near casualties, with Harry at the center of its design. And the next year will prove it again. But Hogwarts is not only dangerous in its corridors and its forests, it is dangerous in its hiring. Year after year, the most strategically vital post in the castle becomes a revolving door of catastrophe, and Harry is placed directly in its path. Consider the defense against the dark arts line. Quirrell, already half consumed, literally possessed by Voldemort. Lockhart, a polished fraud whose entire career is built on stolen memory. Lupin, a good man with a condition the school neither fully discloses nor responsibly manages. Moody, who is not Moody at all, but Barty Crouch Jr., a Death Eater in borrowed skin. Umbridge, a sadist with state power. Snape, a double agent whose loyalties are a labyrinth. Amicus Carrow, an open torturer installed by the regime. Each appointment is a new loaded wand on the table. Quirrell is the first and most obvious failure. When Harry meets him, the man is trembling, stammering, smelling of fear and something worse, already physically deteriorating under the strain of containing another soul. Any competent institution would have asked why a young professor returns from a year abroad, transformed into a hollow-eyed shadow who cannot bear to be touched. No one asks. Not Dumbledore, who had seen possession before and knew the signs. Not Hagrid, who had heard the rumours in the pubs. Quirrell is allowed to roam the castle, to stand inches from children with the back of his head literally hosting the thing that murdered their parents. Intervention comes only when he is already trying to kill Harry over the stone. Then Lockhart, a man whose only verifiable skill is self-promotion, whose books are testimonies to other people's courage erased by memory charms. He is hired not for competence, but for celebrity, a bright, empty replica of a hero. This is important. In a school where the grave of Lily and James Potter is visited in whispered reverence, their son is handed to a man who cannot perform the most basic defensive magic without catastrophic backlash. A bungled dueling demonstration, a sabotaged broken arm, a backfired obliviate in the Chamber of Secrets that could have left Harry mindless beneath the school. Fame was the reference check. The fourth year is worse. Moody arrives scarred, paranoid, drinking from a hip flask, and everyone nods as if this is simply what war does to a man. But it is not Moody. It is a Death Eater who infiltrates the staff, manipulates the goblet, and engineers the Triwizard Maze as a ritual funnel. Every task another step toward a grave that, in this story, would never hold Harry's body because the grave was empty in Godric's Hollow for his parents, not for him. Barty Crouch Jr. delivers the boy to Voldemort with the schools full, if unwitting cooperation. By the time Umbridge carves words into Harry's hand, by the time Snape plays both sides in a game no child should be near, by the time Caro teaches Cruciatus as coursework. The pattern is beyond dispute. Hogwarts vetting is either non-existent or willfully lax, a structural decision that turns every bad hire into another quiet assassination attempt by negligence. And from Cornwall, James and Lily watch each appointment like a new piece moved on a board, knowing that the next name on the staff list might be the one that finally kills their son. Unless they break their own plan first. Because Hogwarts itself is not neutral. It is a predator politely disguised as a school. The castle is alive with moving stone and unsettled geometry, its staircases shifting like a slow, grinding tide. Steps slide sideways mid-stride, whole flights pivot in the air, railings vanish into nothing. An 11-year-old boy can begin a journey toward the library and find himself carried, helpless, toward a forbidden corridor or a blind landing that ends in a sheer drop over the entrance hall. There are no safety harnesses. There is only faith in old magic and older habit. This is important. In any sane institution, the building itself does not attempt to kill its occupants by rearranging the floor plan beneath their feet. Hogwarts does. And no one calls it what it is. The trick steps are worse, in their way. Single stones that swallow a leg to the knee, leaving a child trapped, wand out of reach as the corridor empties and the light fades. Hidden doors that appear as blank stone until the exact right touch. Vanishing cabinets that erase the space between rooms and, if mishandled, the person who steps inside. At midday, these are eccentricities. At midnight, during a fire, during an attack, they are a quiet promise of suffocation and broken necks. Not Dumbledore, who had walked these halls for decades, ever placed a permanent charm to neutralize them. Not Hagrid, who had seen first years stumble and panic, ever questioned why the walls themselves were allowed to turn on the children. Beyond the doors, the grounds fall away into the tree line of the Forbidden Forest, so close that the shadow of its canopy touches the castle lawn. It is a lethal biome, dense with acromantulas whose poison can still a heart in minutes, with werewolves who remember too clearly what prey smells like, with centaurs who consider human children a trespass to be punished, not pitied. The barrier is not a wall, or a ward, or a guarded border. It is a sentence spoken at the sorting feast. Do not enter the forest. That is all. Lily was a charms prodigy, and from Cornwall she watches Harry walk within sight of that tree line, knowing exactly how little such a warning weighs against curiosity and loneliness. She knew what lived there. She knew how quickly a body disappears beneath roots and moss. The grave was empty is not only a statement about Godric's Hollow. It is a description of what the forest makes of the unwary. Within the curriculum itself, lethal creatures are presented as educational tools. Blast-ended scroots that explode without pattern or mercy. Hippogriffs whose pride is edged with talons and beaks, one misjudged bow away from arterial blood on the grass. Thestrals, visible only to those who have already watched someone die, harnessed to carriages as if grief were a transportation system. Each lesson another roll of loaded dice. For Harry, whose story has been shaped by secrets and whose blood hums toward danger, this architecture is not whimsical. It is a labyrinth of normalized threat. A castle that teaches him, year after year, that nearly dying is part of the charm of being alive at Hogwarts. and somewhere in Cornwall, his parents begin to ask a question they have avoided for 14 years. Is the castle trying to finish what Voldemort started? Quidditch is where that question stops being metaphor and becomes impact against bone. 11-year-olds are sent into the sky on strips of wood, no harness, no helmet, no cushioning charm humming beneath their robes. They rise to a height that would shatter a spine on contact with the pitch, then are told to fly faster, turn sharper, dive steeper. Around them hurtle iron balls whose explicit purpose is to knock them from the air. This is important. The rules of the game enshrine the possibility of the fall as part of the spectacle. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but on the Quidditch pitch at Hogwarts, the school builds a new grave for Harry every season and calls it Sport. In his first year, he is nearly torn from his broom by a curse while the stands roar, his body dangling, fingers burning, the ground below a hard, unyielding certainty. No net rises. No invisible replica of safety unfolds beneath him. The match continues until Hermione, not any professor, breaks the spell. In second year, the danger ceases to be abstract. A bludger, hexed to pursue only him, shatters his arm with a sound that Lily hears in Cornwall through the monitoring charm she pretends is only for illness and fever. The bone is ruined. Then Lockhart, incompetent and vain, removes the bones entirely. Skin, muscle, and nothing inside. A limb turned into a soft, wrong thing that should not be alive. And still, the game had gone on until the damage was done. Third year, the threat comes not from iron, but from despair incarnate. Dementors swarm the pitch, drawn to Harry's history like vultures to a battlefield. They drag the heat from the air, the color from the sky, the strength from his hands. He loses consciousness mid-flight. He falls. Only the narrowest margin of luck and broken broom wood keeps his name from being carved into a real grave that night. By fourth year, the weather itself is weaponized. Storms that border on cursed, sabotage that drives him toward the ground, enchantments layered over the stadium that heighten spectacle rather than mitigate risk. Not Dumbledore, who had watched these matches for decades, moves to mandate helmets after Harry's near-fatal plummet. Not Hagrid, who had seen too many broken creatures in the Forbidden Forest, demands nets strung like protective webs beneath the players. Not Sirius, who had flown with James in younger, wilder days, insists that the rules be rewritten for the boy he loves. Nothing systemic changes. No protective lattice of magic is woven under the pitch. No serious reconsideration of bludgers, of Dementors near children, of cursed brooms and sabotaged weather. Pain is treated as pedagogy. Injury as initiation. Glory is the point. Lily was a charms prodigy, and as she watches Harry's injuries accumulate on parchment in Cornwall, she begins to understand the deeper story. Quidditch is the cheerful, normalized face of a culture that teaches children to accept mortal risk as belonging to them. The stadium is a rehearsal space. The roar of the stands is training for the roar of battle. When the time comes to send students into a real war, Hogwarts does not need to convince them that their bodies are expendable. The work has already been done, high above the pitch, in cold wind and thin air. And James and Lily, who built a plan to keep their son alive, have to face a new truth. The castle is not merely failing to protect Harry. It is teaching him how to die beautifully. The lesson does not end on the Quidditch pitch. It continues where the trees begin. The Forbidden Forest is not merely a backdrop of shadows. It is policy, it is curriculum, it is punishment. In Harry's first year, when he is 11 and still half convinced this is all a strange, benevolent dream, detention means being marched to the very edge of that black wall of trees and told that tonight he will walk into it. Not for a supervised herbology exercise, for a hunt. Something has been killing unicorns, leaving silver blood in the leaves like spilled starlight, and the school's response is to send children to investigate. This is important. The scene is often remembered as eerie, almost mythic, but the administrative reality beneath it is colder. A teacher assigns the task. The headmaster sanctions it. The castle, which has stood for 1,000 years, knows exactly what lives beneath those branches. Werewolves that once howled for students, centaurs who have warned and threatened, acromantulas breeding in nests the size of cottages. And still, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Draco are divided into smaller groups and pushed under the boughs. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but the forest is full of eyes, of breath, of things that move just beyond the wandlight. Harry walks beside Hagrid and a trembling Fang, and the air is thick with the metallic scent of unicorn blood and the older, stranger magic of trees that have watched wars come and go. When he is separated, when he follows the trail of silver to a small clearing, he finds what the adult should have feared most, not a nameless predator, but intent. A hooded figure crawls across the ground toward the fallen unicorn, mouth pressed to the wound, drinking. His scar burns like a brand. Pain, sudden and absolute, cleaves through his head. The forest, which had been merely ominous, becomes a chamber of execution. No classroom, no safety net. Only a boy, an almost corpse of a Dark Lord, and the thin line of chance between them. It is not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated so many of these convergences, who stands between Harry and death. Not Hagrid, who had led him in with a lantern and a crossbow. It is Firenze, hooves pounding, body interposed, voice low and furious as he drives the predator away and lifts the child onto his back. A centaur, half wild and half oracle, becomes the emergency protocol. Lily was a charms prodigy, and from Cornwall she watches through her own secret systems as her son is nearly killed in a place his school uses as detention. She knew the forest was dangerous in her own school days. She did not imagine it would be weaponized as pedagogy. And the forest does not release him. Year after year, it waits. Acromantula nests where he and Ron dangle above 1,000 clicking fangs. Centaur confrontations where a misstep could mean an arrow in the back. Finally, the long walk beneath those same branches toward his own execution, the resurrection stone in his hand, the echo of unicorn blood in the leaves. The Forbidden Forest is not an anomaly. It is Hogwarts philosophy made visible. Danger is not quarantined. It is woven into discipline and lesson plans, with children as living test subjects. What kind of institution decides that the correct response to lethal wilderness is to send its smallest students into it and call the result education? When James and Lily review the pattern, the story becomes unbearable. The edge of the forest is the edge of a grave their son keeps stepping into and out of, taught by his school to walk toward it without flinching. And the plan they built to keep him alive begins to look, in the half-light beneath those trees, like a fragile charm set against an entire culture that believes survival itself is an acceptable risk. The castle has shown them the syllabus. The next lessons will only escalate. The lessons do escalate. They escalate around one boy's body. Year 1. An 11-year-old facing a mountain troll in a stone corridor, then lying on cold flagstones beneath a turban that hides Voldemort's face. His first term ends with fingers clawing at his throat, a man's hatred burning through his scar, his life preserved only because his mother once chose to die and because the professor who wants him dead happens to faint. The grave was empty. The danger was not. Year 2. A basilisk in the walls, a diary that eats away at a girl's mind, and Harry on blood-slick stone in the chamber, ribs aching, venom burning through his veins. He kills a creature that has survived centuries and then almost dies alone beside its corpse, saved by phoenix tears and a sword he was never meant to hold. This is important. The pattern is already there. Year 3. Dementors on the train, on the pitch, at the lake. Creatures whose very purpose is to drag a soul toward a fate worse than the grave, stationed as school security. Harry hears his mother's screams every time they come near. He collapses, seizes, wakes in the hospital wing with chocolate and concern, but no sustained question of what it means for a child to relive his own attempted murder as ambient background noise. Year 4. A dragon's fire on his face, icy water closing over his head in the black lake, the maze closing around him like a living tomb. Then the graveyard, where his blood is taken, his body bound, and he watches another boy die so that he can live long enough to duel the man who killed his parents. He returns clutching a corpse. No one removes him from the tournament, no one removes him from the school. Year 5. The Department of Mysteries, falling shelves, spinning rooms, a veil that drinks Sirius's body like water, cursed prophecy orbs, possession by Voldemort himself, the knowledge that his mind is an open door. Year 6. Cursed necklaces, poisoned mead, a tower battle where he stands frozen under a cloak while Dumbledore dies within arm's reach. Year 7. The final war, where the corridors become trenches and the Great Hall becomes a morgue. Lily was a charms prodigy, and from Cornwall she counts these moments with an archivist's precision. Troll, stone chamber, broom sabotage, basilisk, dementors, dragon, lake, maze and graveyard, Department of Mysteries, cursed objects, tower battle, final war. At least one mortal risk per year, often more, each one a fresh cut across the same scar tissue. Harry dreams of green light and screaming. He startles at owls, at sudden noise, at the echo of his own heartbeat in the dark. Hypervigilance becomes his native language. The story brushes against this, nightmares, anger, numbness, but does not dwell on the long, slow erosion of a child who never gets to believe he is safe. And how do the adults answer? Hospital wing beds. Chocolate on the bedside table, a grave expression from Dumbledore, who explains prophecies and greater goods but never once suggests that Harry might leave. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated his placement at Hogwarts. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins and then back to the castle. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of taking him away but never lived long enough to try. If this were your child, at what point would you pull them out? Year 1, when the Trolls Club missed his skull by inches? Year 4, when he came home with someone else's body? Or would you, like everyone around him, accept the premise that his death is an acceptable risk in a larger plan? Because someone is watching who does not accept it. Someone who knows he is already dying by degrees. And the next decision they make will tear their own plan to pieces. Dumbledore has been here before, in a different story, with different children on the altar. This is important. Long before Harry was born, long before the scar and the prophecy, there was another phrase that sat like a polished stone on his tongue, for the greater good. He and Grindelwald built their first empire in words. Two brilliant boys in Godric's Hollow, sketching a new world over parchment and arrogance, convinced that enough magic and enough will could justify any grave they had to fill along the way. Not Dumbledore, who had written those words himself, who had watched his sister die in the crossfire of a dream that demanded someone else's blood as proof of its purity. Publicly, he turned away. He broke Grindelwald, locked him in a fortress, refused to speak the phrase again. But the habit of mind did not die as easily as the friendship. It bent itself into something more respectable, more careful, but not entirely different. In this timeline, as in canon, he reads the prophecy, weighs one boy against a generation, and accepts, quietly, inexorably, that Harry's life may be the price that has to be paid. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but Dumbledore does not know that. He believes he has already buried James and Lily, believes the war has already demanded its tithe. So when he sends Harry back to Hogwarts year after year, into corridors where trolls roam and basilisk shadows coil in the pipes, his internal defense is almost gentle. Each danger is a lesson, each escape a rehearsal, each brush with death, a necessary refinement of the only weapon he thinks he has. He would tell himself that the Triwizard Dragon is not just spectacle, it is calibration. That Dementors at the gates are not only a political compromise, they are inoculation. That a boy who can walk back from these edges will one day walk into the forest and not flinch. He would say that a child who knows he might die is a child who will take the prophecy seriously enough to save the ones who are still alive. But Harry is never really asked. He is never given the full charm and a full cost. No one sits him down at 11 and says, "There is a plan, and you are its center, and you may not live to see the end of the story." Instead, the truth arrives in fragments and half-revealed replicas of honesty. Just enough to keep him moving, never enough to let him truly refuse. And how could he refuse? The boy raised in a cupboard, the boy who learned love from dead photographs and second-hand tales, has been shaped in an environment where saying no to sacrifice feels like treason. Not Hagrid, who had wept over the infant in his arms. Not Sirius, who had offered him a home. None of them ever really present another path. So the ethical knot tightens. Can the same man who sees further than anyone else, who arranges protections like chess pieces across a continent, also be the man who turns a school into a battlefield and a child into a calculated loss? Or is that, in the end, exactly what the greater good has always meant? Because somewhere in Cornwall, two people who rejected that calculus are about to break it, and Dumbledore's long game is about to collide with a different kind of plan entirely. Harry James Potter is brave. This is important. From the first night he draws a wand in anger, he moves toward danger, not away from it. And he does so with a steadiness that would shame most grown wizards. He runs after a troll to save a girl who had no reason to like him. He dives after a dropped remembrall, flies toward a cursed broom, throws himself between Sirius and 100 Dementors, walks into the forbidden forest, knowing he is walking to his own death. No one coerces him with a visible wand at his back in those moments. The choice is his. The courage is real. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but the boy who grew up under that empty grave became someone who would die for others without hesitating. Yet what kind of world did he grow up inside? A world where his first truly kind adult, Hagrid, tells him he is famous for surviving a curse that killed his parents. Where witches and wizards in the Leaky Cauldron weep when they see him, not because he is alive and ordinary, but because his survival is a symbol, a story, a charm against the dark. From 11 onward, every corridor whispers the same lesson. Harry's value lies in his willingness to suffer. Not Dumbledore, who had watched the boy stagger out of one mortal trap after another, ever sits him down to say, "You may refuse." Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the wreckage, tells him that self-preservation is an honourable instinct, not a coward's escape. Not Sirius, who had every reason to fear losing him, models boundaries instead of reckless, almost gleeful danger. Again and again, adults praise the outcome of his survival rather than question the ethics of the risk that was taken. When 11-year-old Harry goes through the trapdoor for the stone, he is commended. When 12-year-old Harry enters the chamber to face a basilisk, he is thanked and photographed. When 14-year-old Harry is forced into the Triwizard Tournament, no one with power makes a credible plan to extract him. The conversation is about rules, not safety. Each time he nearly dies, the narrative around him hardens. This is what Harry does. He walks toward the killing curse so others do not have to. Does he ever truly believe there is another path? Leaving Hogwarts is spoken of only as punishment or disgrace. Refusing to fight is framed as denial, weakness, or treachery. Demanding protection is something other children do. Harry has internalized that he is the shield, not the one shielded. So his choices are real, but they are made inside a cage built of prophecy, expectation, and a school that treats his near-deaths as regrettable necessities rather than catastrophic failures. Hogwarts teaches him that walking into the forest to die is not a horrifying aberration. It is the final fulfillment of the role he has been trained to accept. Somewhere in Cornwall, two people who refuse that role have watched this conditioning tighten around their son like iron, and they are about to break the pattern in a way no one at Hogwarts has imagined. They have watched the pattern close around Harry. But Harry is only one boy in a castle built on other children's endings. The dead have names when the story allows it. Cedric Diggory, in a graveyard not of his choosing, killed because a school tournament became a portkey into war. Colin Creevey, small and stubborn and sent away for his own safety, slipping back into Hogwarts only to fall in the final battle among shattered stone and spent magic. Fred Weasley, laughing in a corridor one moment and then gone, crushed in an explosion that turned a joke shop prince into a body on the floor, and beyond them a scatter of students and younger siblings and unnamed faces, fallen in the chaos of a castle that had invited the Dark Lord to make its corridors a battlefield. This is important. None of them were chosen ones. Cedric was a champion because his name came out of a cup. Colin was a Muggle-born boy with a camera and a hero worship habit. Fred was a twin who had already left school, who returned not because of prophecy, but because his family was there and the fight had come home. They were not raised under a prophecy or conditioned to see their deaths as necessary. They were simply close enough to the blast radius of a school that decided war could be waged where children slept. The injured form a second, quieter grave, Katie Bell screaming on a snowy path as a cursed necklace dragged her toward the sky. Bill Weasley, mauled by Greyback on the very grounds that were supposed to be safest, his face torn open under a lightning-split roof. Students hexed in the corridors during the Carrow's reign, Crucio echoing off stone, others cursed and flung aside during the Battle of Hogwarts, their bodies left between fallen suits of armor and smoking tapestries. Not Dumbledore, who had spoken of love as a protection. Not Hagrid, who had carried them from danger when he could. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of godfatherly mischief and Quidditch in the sun. Children, only children. Their suffering is acknowledged, but always as a toll paid on the road to victory. Names etched on a war memorial, glimpsed once and then passed. A photograph in the Daily Prophet. A sentence in a eulogy that turns almost immediately back to Harry, to the final duel, to the restored peace. The grave was empty for James and Lily, for these others. The grave is full, but the narrative space around it is thin, compressed, made to serve the larger arc. Could a different Hogwarts have spared them? A headmaster who closed the school when basilisk attacks began, who refused Dementors and tournaments and occupation? A staff that treated every child as the center of their own fragile story rather than as background figures in Harry's? Lily was a charms prodigy, and somewhere in Cornwall she and James are asking a forbidden question. What if the greatest magic is not survival in war, but the lives that never had to be risked at all? They have a plan to test that question. And it does not care what Hogwarts has always accepted as inevitable, if their plan is to test a world in which Harry's life is not a yearly offering to fate. Then Hogwarts itself becomes evidence. Evidence that something in Wizarding Britain has forgotten what safety means. Because again and again, the same sentence is spoken with grave certainty: Hogwarts is the safest place in Britain. Hagrid says it with the absolute faith of a man who has never been properly protected. Dumbledore says it with the calm conviction of someone who believes in his own magic more than in contingency. Even McGonagall, sharp-eyed and unsentimental, repeats it as if saying the words could make them true. This is important. If a school that houses a mountain troll in its dungeons, a basilisk in its pipes, Dementors at its borders, and Death Eaters in its corridors is still ranked number 1 for child protection, what does the rest of the country look like? What does a normal day in Diagon Alley mean if the institution that nearly kills Harry every year is still their gold standard? The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but the graves Hogwarts quietly prepares are metaphorical and continuous. First year, an 11-year-old boy is allowed to chase the Philosopher's Stone through a gauntlet of lethal enchantments designed by adults who knew children were on the grounds. Second year, the school remains open while students are petrified by an unseen predator. And the answer is not evacuation, but a 12-year-old sent into the Chamber of Secrets with a sword and a phoenix. Third year, soul-sucking Dementors prowl the perimeter of the castle for protection. Not Dumbledore, who had watched each of these incidents unfold, seems to consider any of this disqualifying. He calls them regrettable, dangerous, unfortunate. He does not call them unacceptable. The story keeps insisting that Hogwarts is safe, and the adults keep acting as though survival with scars is an appropriate outcome for childhood. But Hogwarts is not an aberration. It is a concentrated expression of a culture that hands children racing brooms capable of fatal falls and calls it sport. a culture in which joke shop products routinely cause nosebleeds, unconsciousness or worse, and are praised as entrepreneurial genius. A ministry whose own departments maim their employees so regularly that St. Mungo's has an entire ward set aside for experimental charms accidents, as if grievous injury were a routine cost of being alive in this world. Lily was a charms prodigy, and even she grew up in that culture. She learned dueling in corridors, hexes between classes, the blurred line where education ends and war begins. Hogwarts simply compresses that philosophy into stone and timetable. Lessons by day, battlefields by night. Childhood and conflict sharing the same staircase. So when we look for blame, the outline becomes more complicated. Dumbledore makes choices. Hogwarts as an institution makes choices. But they are choosing within a society that has normalized a level of risk that would horrify any Muggle parent reading Harry's story. If this is the safest place, then safety itself has been quietly redefined. And in Cornwall, two parents who knew another world are asking a different question. What if you refuse that definition entirely? They ask it first in whispers, then in arguments that last until dawn. What if Harry never went back? Not to Hogwarts, which had nearly killed him twice before he turned 13. Not to the castle that called itself Sanctuary while trolls roamed corridors and a basilisk hunted in the pipes. In Cornwall, far from the shadow of the towers, two parents take the question seriously in a way no one inside the school ever will. This is important. Imagine the divergence beginning after the Chamber of Secrets. 2 years. 2 encounters with Voldemort's echo, 2 brushes with a grave that was not yet dug but already waiting. McGonagall, who has watched the boy stagger out of the hospital wing too many times, drafts a report whose language is careful but whose meaning is not. Continued attendance constitutes unacceptable risk. Molly Weasley reads it, presses a shaking hand to her mouth, and thinks of her children's beds all in a row. Even Dumbledore hesitates. In the canon story, he does not pull Harry out. In this one, he does. Or perhaps he is forced to by governors who finally understand that petrified is a word that should never appear in a school safety briefing. Harry goes back to Privet Drive for a final summer and does not receive a Hogwarts letter in the autumn. Instead, a different plan arrives. Private tutoring, order protection. A controlled curriculum in a warded safe house where every window has been spelled against intrusion and every book has been chosen not for glory but for survival. Defense lessons without Quidditch falls. Occlumency without detentions in a castle that whispers with portraits and secrets. He meets Remus under supervised conditions, learns Patronus magic without Dementors circling a pitch full of children. His life is still strange. He is still the boy who lived, still the child whose name is a charm spoken in frightened kitchens. But the days are not saturated with mortal peril. There is no Triwizard dragon roaring over his head at 14, no maze that becomes a graveyard, no tournament whose prize is a corpse. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, in this path. So are the graves that would have been dug for Cedric, for Colin, for Fred. The trade is stark. He is less prepared in some ways, less blooded, less bound to Ron and Hermione by nights spent facing death together under an invisibility cloak. He grows powerful, but not in the particular crucible of shared terror and impossible choices. Would he be as willing to walk into the forest and die if he had not been trained year after year to see his own life as expendable? Yet he is also less traumatized, less conditioned to believe that pain is the price of meaning. Not Dumbledore, who had always believed that love would guide the boy to the right sacrifice. Not Hagrid, who had trusted the school the way other men trusted churches. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of Godfather weekends in Hogsmeade. None of them ever truly imagine a Harry whose first instinct is not to offer himself. Could Voldemort still be defeated without Hogwarts as forge and battlefield? Perhaps Lily was a charms prodigy, and the Order is not without resources. Horcruxes can be hunted by adults. Prophecies can be interpreted by minds not resting on a child's narrow shoulders. A different war could be waged, slower, more deliberate, with Harry as protected weapon rather than exposed bait. But the cost is different too. Without the friendships forged in those corridors, without the stubborn loyalty of a girl who would follow him into a cursed forest and a boy who would leave his family's table to stand at his side, Harry's courage might remain untested theory. The story would lose its school, and with it the ordinary scaffolding that makes extraordinary choices legible. In this alternate timeline, Hogwarts becomes what it was always supposed to be, a place Harry leaves behind, rather than the arena in which he is repeatedly offered up. And from Cornwall, two unseen parents watch the world that chose otherwise and understand with terrible clarity that an institution's decision to keep one boy enrolled has written the fate of a war. The question lingers, unanswered. In a world where safety was chosen over legend, would the Dark Lord fall or simply wait for a boy who never learned to walk into the fire? The question hangs over the map of Britain, over Cornwall and Scotland alike. Because while Harry's parents watch from exile and imagine a quieter fate, millions of readers return, again and again, to the castle that almost killed him and call it by another name. Home for so many, Hogwarts is not a battlefield. It is the first place in the story that feels truly alive. Floating candles over a great hall that glows like a cathedral of warmth. Tables groaning under feasts that never quite run out. Common rooms with crackling fires where friendships take root at 2 a.m. over chessboards and chocolate frog cards. The dormitory curtains drawn against the dark. The soft murmur of breathing. The sense that the grave outside Godric's Hollow has been replaced by something gentler, belonging. This is important. The emotional truth is that the castle saves the reader long before it tries to save the boy. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated the school year like a chess problem. Not Hagrid, who had dragged him from one world into another. Hogwarts itself becomes the embrace. The first letter. The first glimpse of the boats on the lake. The first realization that magic is not only terror and prophecy, but moving staircases and talking portraits and a library that seems to breathe. And yet, the forensic truth sits beside it like a second, colder ink. The same corridors that echo with laughter are the ones where an 11-year-old bleeds from Quirrell's hands. The same hospital wing that smells of potions and safety is where petrified children lie rigid as replicas, their lives suspended by a monster in the walls. The Quidditch pitch that roars with joy also hosts bone-shattering falls, Dementors closing in, a boy's soul almost torn away while the crowd watches, helpless and small. Year after year, the pattern repeats. A troll in the dungeon. A basilisk in the plumbing, Dementors at the gates, a werewolf in the trees, dragons chained beside school towers, a tournament with a documented body count, reborn as entertainment. The castle that feels like sanctuary is also a labyrinth of nearly lethal choices, and no one writes that in the prospectus. To engage with this story as an adult is to refuse to choose between these truths. The wonder that rescued lonely children at midnight and the horror that nearly killed Harry in every book are not in conflict. They are the same architecture viewed from different floors. Lily was a charms prodigy, but no charm she could have woven from Cornwall would have changed that stone. Perhaps this is why the series endures, because the world beyond the page is full of institutions like this, schools and churches and orders and ministries that nurture and neglect in the same breath, that offer protection with one hand and unacceptable risk with the other. Places that feel like home until the moment they do not. And by then, the cost has already been paid. So the next time the reader walks back through those doors, the invitation is simple and severe. See the candles, but remember the curses. Hear the jokes in the common room, but let them echo against the knowledge of how much blood those walls have already seen. Read every cozy scene as a rug laid over a floor plan of danger. Every feast as a brief armistice in a war the children have not consented to fight. Because somewhere in that castle, in this version of the tale, two unseen parents have eyes on every corridor and a different question forming. If Hogwarts is both refuge and trap, both miracle and miscalculation, then when the final crisis comes, will the castle save their son? Or demand one last unforgivable debt? In that tension between sanctuary and snare, the question sharpens. Who, in the end, failed Harry, the school that housed him, the society that shaped it, or the storyteller who taught us to applaud while the walls burned? Begin with the institution. Hogwarts is not merely leaky in its security, it is porous by design. A castle that invites danger in and then calls it curriculum. In his first year, the headmaster chooses to hide an object coveted by the darkest wizard of the age beneath a school of children, guarding it with lethal enchantments that an 11-year-old can, with enough curiosity and courage, survive. This is important. The failure is not only that the troll reaches the dungeon, or that 3 first years reach the stone. The failure is that the line between lesson and lethal trial is allowed to blur until nobody inside those walls can reliably tell which is which. Year after year, the pattern calcifies. A basilisk stalks the pipes while classes continue. Dementors, creatures whose very presence is a living grave, ring the grounds of a boarding school. A tournament with a recorded body count is revived, and when Harry's name emerges from the replica of an impartial artifact, the adults do not dismantle the game, they adjust the rules and send a child against dragons and deep water and an ambush in a graveyard. Not Dumbledore, who had watched each escalation and still called this place the safest home Harry could know. But Hogwarts exists inside a larger weather system. The wizarding world that built this castle also built its ethics. It is a culture that treats children as soldiers in waiting, that speaks of war as if it were weather, inevitable and cyclical, and of death as the regrettable but acceptable currency of victory. The stories these people tell their young are not cautionary tales that end with retreat. They are legends that end with a body on the floor and a wand still raised. Harry grows up in a society where a baby's survival is a political symbol, where prophecy is discussed with the same calm as exam results, where the idea of a boy meeting his fate in a forest is tragic but not unthinkable. Then the lens turns again, this time on the story itself. The narrative wraps these horrors in pace and charm and laughter. A basilisk attack is bracketed by jokes about homework. The Triwizard tasks are staged like a spectacle, scored with excitement rather than dread. Scenes that in another genre would read as pure horror are framed as the necessary gauntlet of a chosen hero. The grave was empty, but the narrative seldom pauses long enough to let us look at the cost of that emptiness. And so the last failure may be ours. We knew on some level that no real parent would send their child to a place where the forest itself is a sentence, where the hospital wing functions as a revolving door for trauma. Yet we loved the castle, we loved the feasts and the moving staircases and the illusion of safety so much that we accepted the bargain the story offered: Harry will suffer so that Hogwarts can remain beautiful in our minds. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from the ruins, not Sirius, who had dreamed of giving him a home. And not the silent Potters in this version of the tale are as implicated in that bargain as the reader who turns the page without flinching. It is possible to love this story and still admit a quieter truth. If Hogwarts were real, no sane guardian would sign the parchment. Especially not guardians who are, impossibly, still alive and watching. The question that waits in the next turn of the corridor is simple and unforgiving. When the final decision comes, will their love for the boy outweigh their faith in the castle that almost killed him every year he called it home? When the final decision comes, it does not arrive in a council chamber or a war room. It arrives in a corridor lit by burning tapestries and falling dust, in the echo of screams behind stone walls that once held homework and house banners. Harry turns away from the last refuge of his childhood and walks toward the trees. The battle is still raging. Spells crack like distant thunder, stone shudders, giants roar somewhere beyond the towers. The castle that had been his first real home is groaning under the weight of war, its very bones remembering every year it almost lost him. This is important. He is not walking out from an ordinary battlefield. He is walking away from the school that taught him to fly, to duel, to break rules, and to treat mortal risk as a kind of homework assignment. In his hand, the resurrection stone turns once, twice, like a tiny planet of grief. The grave was empty. Or rather, every grave he had ever been given for his parents was in some sense a charm and a story instead of a simple, clean truth. Now their shades step out of the dark to meet him. James at his shoulder, Lily at his side. Sirius and Lupin flanking him like a guard of honor assembled from all the men who had failed to stay alive long enough to see him grown. They walk with him into the Forbidden Forest. The same forest where first years were sent to track a creature that drank unicorn blood. The same trees that had watched him face acromantulas, centaurs, werewolves, and worse. Hogwarts had always used the forest as a boundary and a warning. It had also used it as a classroom, not Dumbledore, who had signed the permissions and called it education. Not Hagrid, who had led children between the trunks with a lantern and a kind heart, saw the quiet conditioning for what it was. Every year, the stakes increased. A troll in the dungeon, a basilisk in the pipes, Dementors at the gates, dragons over the lake, and a graveyard at the end of a maze. Each time Harry stepped forward, the adults around him did not drag him back. They nodded, they trusted, they praised. What else could a boy conclude but that his pain was necessary? that his survival was negotiable, that sacrifice was the only passing grade. So when he understands at last that he is a Horcrux and that Voldemort must kill him, the choice feels less like a choice and more like the final question on an exam he has been sitting since age 11. He does not rage. He does not bargain. He accepts. The courage is real. The love is real. The quiet, shaking breath as he steps into the circle of Death Eaters is one of the most beautiful. Terrible moments in the story. Yet there is a darker reading, whispered between the trees. A boy who never had a safe home, never had a truly safe school, is now performing the role he was, in some sense, trained to play. He is dying for a world that failed to keep him from needing to. And somewhere far away, in a cottage built on lies and replicas and impossible watching, two parents who are still alive must face the question that Hogwarts has finally made unavoidable. Do they let the castle finish what it began, or do they break their own plan to pull their son back from the grave one last time? Hogwarts has brought him to the edge of the grave every year. This is important, because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. First year, an 11-year-old walks past a three-headed dog, nearly dies on a bewitched broom, and descends through lethal protections to face the fragment of a Dark Lord attached to his teacher's skull. Second year, he follows blood on the walls into the bones of the castle itself, stands alone before a basilisk whose gaze is a death sentence. Third year, Soul Eaters circle the grounds of a school, and one of them very nearly takes his. Fourth year, a tournament with a known body count is resurrected in the name of tradition, and the boy who should have been too young is bound by an enchanted contract and delivered, wand in hand, to a graveyard and murder. Fifth year, the corridors fill with resistance and repression, and a vision lures him into a trap that ends with Sirius falling through the veil. Sixth year, cursed fire devours a classroom, poison nearly stops his heart, and the headmaster who was supposed to be the fixed point of safety dies on the astronomy tower. Seventh year, the war comes openly, and the castle becomes a battlefield where children bleed on the flagstones. The thesis is stark. Voldemort is the obvious villain, the visible terror. But Hogwarts is the constant environment, the enchanted stone cradle that keeps lowering him over the abyss year after year. Not Dumbledore, who had watched the pattern unfold and still sent the letters. Not Hagrid, who had carried him to the ruins once and then carried him back through those gates with a birthday cake and a promise that he was safe now. The institution around them remained the same, beautiful, ancient, and lethally porous. Some of these dangers are negligence, the product of a culture that treats mortal peril as a kind of curriculum. Some are war, the inescapable consequence of a world where magic and ideology collide. Some may be Dumbledore's long game, the quiet, terrible decision to let the boy grow sharp on real danger because prophecy and strategy left no gentler path. From Harry's perspective, the distinction barely matters. The result is identical, a childhood lived on a knife's edge where every term might be his last. Yet this reading does not erase the wonder. It complicates it. The feasts still glow, the floating candles still drift like stars caught indoors, the first sight of the Great Hall is still a revelation. But the light throws longer shadows now. The same ceiling that shows the weather also witnessed curses, falling rubble, and a boy walking alone to his own death because he believed that was the only way his friends would live. Hogwarts stops being a perfect refuge and becomes what it always truly was, a flawed, dangerous, beloved place that formed him and nearly unmade him, often in the same night. So when we return to the books, we carry this double awareness. We see the sorting feast and the troll in the dungeon in the same breath, the Quidditch pitch and the cursed broom, the library and the forbidden section that hides the map to his next near-death. We remember that the story's greatest school is also its most persistent risk, and as we move forward, we ask a quieter, harder question. If the castle itself is complicit, what does it mean in this darker timeline for two parents who are still alive to trust it with their son even one day longer? So now the question turns, quietly but relentlessly, toward you. 7 years, 7 cycles of term letters and train rides and near-funeral procession. Looking back over everything we have walked through, which year feels like Hogwarts' greatest sin? Was it the troll in the dungeon, a mountain of flesh and rage allowed to wander within stone walls that were supposed to be a sanctuary? Was it the gauntlet beneath the school where lethal magic guarded a stone and the clues were so porous that 3 first years could slip through them like smoke? This is important, because if children can reach the traps can reach the children. Or do you find the unforgivable moment in the 2nd year, when the basilisk slid through pipes older than the castle's own memory? When student after student lay stiff as marble and the halls still rang with lessons and house points and Quidditch practice, the grave was empty every time a bed in the hospital wing was filled, because the institution refused to admit that a school had become a hunting ground. Perhaps you cannot move past the Dementors, creatures of pure absence, stationed at the gates of a place meant to be full of light, their hunger brushing against every fragile mind that passed. Not Dumbledore, who had seen the records of Azkaban, could pretend he did not know what they were. Not Hagrid, who had watched children flinch at spiders, could believe they were a reasonable perimeter. Intent may have been protective. Impact was terror. Maybe your line is the tournament, a historical spectacle with a documented body count. Reintroduced the very year a boy who never put his name in the goblet is forced to bind himself to Dragonfire, Black Lake and Graveyard. Or the later years when corridors become invasion routes, when Death Eaters walk the Astronomy Tower, when the final battle spills through common rooms and classrooms and the very staircases themselves. Here is the harder layer. Does it change your judgment if you believe Dumbledore meant well? If his plan was always to shape a weapon who was also a boy, to trust that magic and love and prophecy would somehow keep that boy alive long enough to matter? Or do you hold that outcome outweighs intention? That nearly dying is still nearly dying no matter how noble the strategy behind it? Would you send your own child there, knowing everything we have uncovered in this darker retelling? If you say yes, perhaps you value growth through adversity, the belief that real courage requires real danger. If you say no, perhaps your heart leans toward institutional accountability, toward the conviction that a school that repeatedly gambles with lives has forfeited its right to teach. Your answer reveals what you seek in a story, safety, sacrifice, or the brutal honesty of systems that fail the young. And in a world where James and Lily are still alive, listening, planning, watching, their answer may not be the same as yours. In the next part, we will see what they choose to do with that knowledge. They choose, and we return to where we began. A castle on a stormy night. Wind clawing at the towers. Rain needling the Black Lake. candles burning in 1,000 windows, each one a promise that inside these walls a boy is safer than the world outside. This is important, because now we know how often that promise failed him. Year after year, corridor after corridor, the light in those windows became a kind of illusion, a soft focused charm laid over something harsher. A troll in the dungeon, a basilisk in the pipes, Dementors on the grounds, dragons over the lake, Death Eaters in the sky. The story taught us to see these as adventures, as the necessary curriculum of a destined hero. But beneath the music and the magic, the truth is simpler and colder. A child almost died, again and again, in a place that called itself a school. To re-examine that place now, to walk those passages with older eyes and count the graves that might have been, is not betrayal. It is a deeper form of loyalty. Loving Hogwarts does not mean pretending its stones are innocent. It means caring enough to see the cracks in the walls of the castle that raised us and refusing to look away when the crack runs straight through a child's first year, and second, and third. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated protections and plans and who watched the pattern repeat. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from one ruin into another and called it home. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of a different life and found only war. None of them ever truly stood back and said the design itself is dangerous. But you can. You can love this story and still ask what it costs. You can keep the warmth of the Great Hall, the first glimpse of the moving staircases, the taste of pumpkin juice, and still wonder how many times a child can be placed in mortal peril before the word home begins to sound like a lie. The grave was empty. The danger was not. If you want to keep walking this line between wonder and indictment, stay. There are more long-form dissections to come. Alternate readings where different choices are made. What-ifs where a single altered plan saves or damns a life. Ethical autopsies of magical worlds that taught us who we were before we knew to question them. Share this with the friend who still speaks of Hogwarts only as refuge, as the place they run to when the real world closes in. Offer it not as an accusation, but as an invitation to talk about the stories that shape them and the hazards hidden inside the homes we build in fiction. In your mind, let the candles in the castle go out, one by one. The towers darken. The lake goes black. The storm keeps moving. Somewhere in that vast silhouette, a few stubborn lights remain. Just enough to see the question lingering in the corridors: how many times can we almost lose a child before we admit that the place which endangers him is not only home but hazard, and decide what we will do with that knowledge?